Hello, friends. Welcome to Coding Garden with CJ. Welcome to a code Q&A. We're going to be answering some code questions. And welcome in. It's been a while. I didn't get to stream last week due to unforeseen circumstances, but I'm back. I'm glad to see all your smiling faces here. Let's get some smiles in the chat. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in. Is there a coding garden without CJ? No, there's not. But I'm leaving the option open. You know, if in the future coding garden is this huge enterprise, it could be the coding garden umbrella. But for now, it's just me, and it always has been. Welcome in, everybody. Like I mentioned, we're going to be answering questions. So if you have a question, you should absolutely use the chat commands to get your question onto this page. The reason being is there are a lot of you here, and I might miss your question. So if you use the ask command in the chat, it'll show up here. It'll be in order of when they came in, but also you can upvote other questions. I strongly suggest that you go to this website, vox.coding.garden, and try to upvote other questions before you ask your own question, because if you're familiar with this stream, people ask a lot of questions. So we often don't get to all of the questions. So the best thing you can do is vote for someone else's question so that it potentially gets answered. But welcome in, everybody. Yeah, I got a different background today. See, the plan, I was going to stream, I think, was it Saturday? But I spent an hour debugging that map check-in app that we built. And I just couldn't get it working. But that's related to the background because I was going to do a stream on a CSS challenge. And then my background was going to be related to that CSS challenge. But regardless, we're here now. Welcome in, everybody. Thank you for that hype train. I might have missed some other things, but I'm going to try to say hello to everybody. We have a ton of supports, and I guess a ton of resubs because I didn't get to stream last week, so lots of people. And I guess it's also a new month. Thank you, everybody. Ched with the 17 months. George coming in with the 10 months. Roger Voth with the 12 months, who says, "What is your least favorite framework?" You didn't clarify front end or back end. And you know me, I use the things that I like. If you're talking about back end, I've never actually used it. I've tried to use it, and I've read through the docs, and it seems like something that I would dislike very much if I were to have to spend a lot of time in it, and that is get ready for it. Nest.js. Now, this is probably a fine framework, and some of you out there might love it, but on the surface, I don't like it. So that's probably my least favorite framework. And welcome, Doc, with the 18 months. Freak Zombie with the 7 months. Welcome in. It is Friday. And Rainy with the 12 months. Cameron with the 6 months. The She-Boss with the 16 months. And no worries about forgetting the resub. Thanks for being here. The Tim A with the 12 months. DS Legends with the 12 months. The She-Boss with the 5 gifted subs. Thank you so much for your support. Digital Flower, thank you for the sub. Lord, thank you for that host. And George with the 10 months. And Milos just now with the 13 months. I'll start my first job as a Vue front-end dev in about 10 days. Your channel and other resources helped a lot. Nice. Glad to hear it, Milos. Congrats. Yeah. What are we doing? Welcome. Welcome in, everybody. Yeah, why not American 2050? Honestly, when I can stream more, right now, you all know it's one stream a week, but when I have more time, I think it would be fun to do one stream a month or every couple of weeks where I code in something that I'm extremely unfamiliar with or that I historically do not like. Because we all have to do it. We can have opinions and choices as developers, but we also have to work in teams, and sometimes other people on the team like things that we don't like, and so we have to use them anyways. So yeah, why not? Okay, but let's all play the drop game. In the chat, if you do !drop me, that will drop your avatar from the sky, just like that. Oh, here comes Avi. Oh, and Avi just got a new job. Let's get some hearts in the chat for Avi, and congratulations. But if you land in the garden, which Sequel Gordster did, but it's gonna be tiny. Teeny tiny. Pablo, thank you for the bits. Nice. Glad to hear you got that t-shirt. Yeah, I'm glad that that they worked it out. Sorry it took so long, but I'm glad you got it. And there you go. March. The big drop. Great work. Great work. Who's this? It's Nick. Great job, Nick. Nice. You got hired at an insurance company. Very good. Very good. 2 weeks without garden is an experience I don't recommend. Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't get to stream last week. I'm busy. Got a lot going on in my life. Yeah. And yeah, so for those of you that are just coming in here, if you do have a question, be sure to use the ask command. So if you have a question, !ask, followed by your question, and then that question will show up here, and we won't lose it in the chat because there's a lot of chat messages. And if you just ask the question in the chat, it's unfair to the people that have already asked questions, but also I'll probably miss your message because there's a lot of chats. And Javi says they liked me enough they gave me the job front-end software engineer. Nice. That's a good title. Cool. And is anybody here for the first time? Can I just get a 1 in the chat if this is your first time here? And a 2 if you've been here more than once. Welcome, Neltron. Come on. Come on, Timmy. Come on. Oh, I see new names. Zeal, LG Drift, what's up? Coder's Gym has already been here before. Midas, how's it going? What's Tech Noob? Soslav says first time today. Nice. Yeah, welcome in, first timers. Yeah. Oh, that's good to hear, Klein. You just joined your local fire department. Well, the fact that work has picked up is not good because that means there's more fires. But I'm glad you're working there. Cool. And there were some people with first time ever chatting. First time. We've got Herdermatry, Neltron, Sebastian, Vladik, Antis Derp, Drokai, Trepinvitsen, Samir, Besa Petter. And congrats on getting your first job so young. That's awesome. You didn't have to go to college, just straight into the workforce making money. I would have done it if I had the chance. So congrats. And Zelen, what's up? And Sosav and E70, welcome, first timers. Glad to have you here. Long time lurker. Well, welcome, Computational Mama. Thanks for sending a message. Yeah. I'm working to get my Mac coding environment set up. Can you send me the link to the page with the VS Code set up? Yes, absolutely. And for anybody else that needs it, when you see my code editor, you're gonna love it. So, I mean, it hasn't changed, but people always ask if you do ! theme. I think that that takes you to the theme. But also, if you do ! VS Code, does that give you the setting? Yeah. You can go here. It talks about my theme, and then it also talks about all my settings for VS Code and stuff like that. Yeah. So that's good to hear, Avi. I haven't really used any extensions for that. I usually use YouTube DL to do like downloading and stuff like that. I think it's 15 years of experience. I don't know. I mean, we live in a technological world. You could be pretty technical from an early age these days. Yeah. Nice. That's good to hear, DS Legends. Their son attended a code day at a company, talked with the founders, and then got a job. It's awesome. Oh, it's just volunteer work. That's good to hear, Klein. Okay. For all the new people in here, let me tell you how the chat works, because you can see that people have some flair, some customizability in the chat. So you can see that some people, like Avi, has the Vue logo. Who else? I mean, DS Legends has the Vue logo as well. The Sheboss has the Java logo. Depopom has, what is this? The Delicious logo. What is this? GG circle. Cool. So you too put a nice little flair. next to your name. What is this, Freak Zombie? Oh, Dungeons and Dragons. All right. But if you go to the Font Awesome brand cheat sheet, you can pick anything from that page and set it on your chat message. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So if you go to this page, well, it's not loading. What if I disable my ad blocker? Does this happen for anybody else? Well, and Pranjal says they got into Microsoft. That's awesome. Thank you so much for your valuable content. Been watching for 3 years. Learned a lot. I'm so happy for the work you're doing. Oh, thank you so much, Pranjal. And I'm glad to hear everybody's getting hired. This is great. Well, congrats. That's really awesome. Okay, I disabled my ad blocker and I can see it now. So from this page, let's pick one. It's been a while since I used it. I'm going to do Envira. I actually don't know what it is, but it's a leaf. And that's pretty on brand. So in the chat, I can now do !team followed by that. And then all of my messages will have that little leaf on them like that. You can also set your country. If you do !country followed by your 2-character country code, it will put your country flag next to your name. And I'm going to take the next 2 minutes to gripe about something that happened. So when we implemented that country feature, we used restcountries.eu. It was a completely free and open API. And all of a sudden, they've changed their name or they got acquired or something to Country Layer. And now, in order to use the API, you have to sign up for an API key, which is fine. This is fine. Sign up for an API key. Fine. Like, I'll do that. So I did that. And then on the free tier, for whatever reason, you can't access the API over HTTPS. You can only use HTTP on the free tier. So they want you to pay $10 a month to use SSL encryption. What year is it? Yeah, so you know what I did? I just downloaded the list of all the countries, put it in a JSON file, and that's what we're using now. We're not using this API anymore. But I would think of the tremendous hosting costs involved in serving stack. No, that's the thing. Like, the main feature of their API is filtering an array of, 255 countries or something like that? Yeah, I that's the thing. I understand monetization. It's perfectly fine. But to go from completely free and open to a closed model that also like hinders certain features, I don't know. But yeah, I get it. People got to make money. Okay. What will I do if a country... I think our JSON file of 200 or so countries is fine. Yeah. The thing is, I made maybe 2 requests to their API anytime I streamed, and that's the only time I ever called their API. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm tempted to just make it free, right? But I don't know. Regardless, set your country code in the chat with no help to whatever they change their name to. But use your 2-character country code. For me, it's the US. For you, it might be or probably is something else. And then in your chat message, you'll get a nice little flag like that. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's one of the things that irked me is like a paywall on HTTPS in this day and age. Like, it doesn't cost them that much more to run the traffic through a server that has an SSL certificate. Does it? Do they know something that I don't know? Cool. The other thing you can do is set your pronouns. So, no, it doesn't. Yeah, I mean, come on. Hey, what's up, Sai? How's it going? But you can also set your pronouns in the chat. You can see that Sai has his pronouns set to he, him, his. So you can choose from this list: she, he, they, they, ko, none, they, hi, it, one, em, or yo. And then in the chat, do ! pronoun followed by your preferred one. For me, it's he, him, his. And then your messages will have your pronouns on them. It's more effort to check for HTTP. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, they had to implement that feature that blocked requests to HTTPS if the API key was from a free account. I don't know. Sheba says, love Fridays is the perfect excuse to slack off and watch CJ. Nice. Glad you could be here. The last day of a sprint, so that's probably not a great way. I'm sure you did all your work, right? I'm sure it's all done. I think that's about it. Let's start answering some questions. No, exactly, Sai. They bring that feature request to the dev team. All right, we want to disable HTTPS if the API key is on the free tier. I don't know. What's up, Crux? I'm struggling to stay motivated towards programming, so I was just wondering what keeps you motivated to code. I think for me, Crux, is that I've been doing it for so long. And in the early days, and I mean, even now, I'm a very just persistent person. Some might say stubborn or strong-headed, in that if I'm like if I can't figure something out, or something's just been going wrong, it's very rare that I actually give up. I just keep going and going. And I think having coded for so long and kept that mentality, and the majority of the time, anytime I feel like I can't figure something out or something is going wrong, I always make it to the other side. I always eventually figure it out, or eventually figure out like a workaround or something like that. So I have all these little wins built up inside of me that's just like, no matter what you throw at me, I'll just keep going and going until I get it. So that just takes time. But I mean, that's what keeps me motivated, is problems to solve. There are problems to solve that have not been solved yet, and I want to be the one to solve them. So I would say that's my main motivation. Grit. Yeah. Cool. Let's say hi to everybody, and then we're going to answer some questions. Yeah, we got quite a few in here, so that's good. And if you would like to say hello, if you've already said hello, you don't have to say it again, because I'll see it. But in the chat, you can do hi, hello, hey, morning, afternoon, evening, howdy, good day, coding, hiyo, vohayo, or bogahay. Say any one of these things, and I will acknowledge you. And we're going to go back in time to 29 minutes ago, where Sir Davos was the first person to say hello. What's up, Sir Davos? And what's up, Doc? Hello, Yukarai. And Cookify, and Ibaldi, and Slake, and Ellers, and Sebastian, what's up, Sound of Gaming, and Mootlock, and Avi, and Antisturp, and Mark, and Roger, and the OxD, and Infomath Music. Welcome in. It's been a while. Thanks for being here. What's up, Rainy by Sun, and Dinafarb, and Irasam, and Klein. Hello, Drunk Time Lord, and Janek, and the She-Boss, and Odd Nation. Hello, Drokai, and Katoli, and Dynamic Voyage, and Zamar, and Igzard, and Thon, and King, and the Scientistic. What's up, Dune Alive, and Sai, and Danger Mouse, and Nookie Poo, and Tim, and TJ Mr. P1, what's up, Coders Jim, and Veritatas, and Zelin, and Yana B, and Mock. Hello, Works in It Up. What's up, Depopom, and Ajay, and Havercake, and Crux, and Fun Planet, and Sir Raven Pie, and Pranjal. Congrats again to Pranjal for getting the job at Microsoft. What's up, Nazgul, and Jim, and Smiley, and Inez, who says, I just landed a new job as a full stack dev. Any suggestions? Do your best. That's my suggestion. I mean, it really depends on what industry you're in, I guess, or what kind of work will you be doing. Will you be mostly focused on front end or mostly focused on back end? I would say my first suggestion is just kick back. You just got a job. You landed a job. That's great. That's the hard part's over. Now you just got to go to work and try your best. What's up, Paul? And Freak Zombie, and hello, Vlad, and Bisty, and the Time, and Nick, and Patrick, and Fart Dad, Punch a Bunch. How's it going? What's up, Sirkoff, and Basapetter, and Scrimpy Data, and Pete Pal, and Tom Sai, and Ibrahim, and Mines, and Pablo, and Aldo Kuhn, and King Coding, and Prawin, and Sakuraimo, and Johnny, and Midas, and Mark Boots. Hello, Spanky, and X Neltron. Welcome in, everyone. Glad to have you here. First suggestion, hold the source code hostage. Or another suggestion is start with the middleware. Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, another suggestion is just keep the job. Yeah, I realize we're being funny, but if you have a more pointed or specific request for tips, I guess. But yeah, honestly, just relax in the fact that you got a job. All right, let's talk about some things, and then we'll start answering questions. So first of all, Twitch has rolled out a new feature where we can restrict the chat to only people that have verified their account with a phone number. Now, the reason we might do this is because it would prevent things like spam bots. So people create hundreds or thousands of accounts and then they just start spamming channels. But it would be really hard to create hundreds or thousands of accounts with verified phone numbers. So, yeah. And then the only reason why I might not enable this is if there's a significant number of people in the community that actually don't have a phone number that they can verify with for whatever reason. But yeah, Doc brought this to my attention, so I thank you for that, Doc. So we're going to run a quick poll, and I think I'll run a poll if the viewership increases, because right now we're about 270 viewers. Sometimes it goes up a little bit more, but I might run a poll in the Discord as well. Because the thing is, like, if we enable this, it is a barrier to entry. Yeah. But it would prevent certain types of things happening in our chat. So, yeah. So we'll do a poll for that. The other thing is, quick shout out, it's October, so Hacktoberfest is happening again. If you are new to this, essentially what it is DigitalOcean and these other companies. I guess it mainly is put on by DigitalOcean, I thought. But these other companies are trying to bring awareness about open source and trying to get new people into contributing to open source. And so essentially, you can go to their site and read all the info, but if you sign up and then open, I think, 3 pull requests within the month of October, you'll get a free t-shirt. I believe that's how it works. Can anyone confirm that's how it works? Start hacking? They're not telling me how many pull requests I need. How do I mean, the frequently asked questions is just a Google Doc, which is fine. Or I don't know if this is a Google Doc. It's just a... Okay, 4. I think it's 4. 4 pull requests. Cool. So check it out. Let's do a quick poll. We'll see how the chat's feeling in terms of a verified phone number. And then someone remind me closer to the end of the stream to run another poll. Should we require a verified phone number to chat? No. Yes. Vote now. It's 4. Yeah. So if you open 4 pull requests in the month of October, you'll get a t-shirt. And I guess real quick while that poll is running, I'll mention I've done a video in the past on how to contribute to open source. And also what is open source. So here's a video that describes what open source is. So if you don't know what that is, you can start there. And then here is a video where I detail how you yourself would start contributing to open source if you wanted to, including a live example where I actually am not even able to complete the task. But I showed how to search for an issue. We got the code running, all that good stuff. So you can, if you're interested in open source, check all that out. All right, how we doing? Wow, it's split. Yeah, and half of you are bots. No, I'm just kidding. I understand that some people are not comfortable giving their phone number out, or you don't have a phone number that you can verify with. Yeah. Actually, that's a better question, isn't it, Doc? It's the better question is, do you have access to a phone number? Because I'm not like, then it's up to you to decide on whether you want to use that phone number to chat in my chat. So, I don't know. Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people would still watch if they couldn't chat. It really would just, the thing is, it doesn't happen that often, like the bot follows and stuff like that. But you know, this would be good in general. It would reduce the number of trolls and stuff like that. Yeah. Does it have to be a cell phone? I don't know. Maybe because they need like a text message. I think they can do calls as well, though. Can I use a landline or a VoIP number? No, you can't. Phone verified chat relies on SMS. Okay, so we'll keep that in the back of our minds. I haven't enabled it yet, and also know that if I ever do enable it, maybe I'll disable it if chat engagement is down. But let's start answering some questions. First question from the She-Boss, longtime supporter of the stream, Java developer. The She-Boss asks, what are your thoughts on working at several companies to gain experience in several technologies versus the stability of gaining seniority at one company? We had a debate about this recently, and the viewpoints were interesting. Yeah. This is a great, just like long-term career question. I would say personally, I would prefer to get more experience at different companies, because like I have worked at this point like 3 or 4 companies, and every company is different. Big companies, small companies, middle-sized companies, they all work very differently. And the thing is, if you stay long-term, let's say like a large enterprise, so thousands of employees, big company, that's like serious job security because the longer you stay, the more institutional knowledge you have, and then the more people depend on you, because you've been at the company so long that, well, you've been there longer than people that have only been there a few years, people that were there a few years and then left. You're like the continuity, you're the institutional knowledge of the company, so it's very valued. That said, there are benefits to jumping between companies. Like I never really did this. I've stayed at companies at least 3 years, but some people will jump every 1 or 2 years in order to get a pay bump. And depending on where you are in the world, that's definitely something that can happen. You basically use your previous job as leverage to get like a 20% or so raise at a newer company. And that's usually more of a raise than you would get having just stayed at the company. So if you want to make more money, jump between companies. If you want to have real job security, potentially stay at the same company. And I think the other aspect of it is like just you as a person, do you just get bored in one place? And if you do, then it's probably not for you to just stay at a company. So yeah, a really interesting question though. Interesting to think about. And this is why you have positions at companies like principal developer. A principal developer is basically they have so much experience and they've been around for so long, they're almost like a tenured employee, and that like they can't be fired because they know too much. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it, but that's a thing. But cool. Thank you for your question, the She-Boss. Cool. Thanveer asks, what's the best platform for building e-commerce? Right now, I use Magento. I'll be honest, I haven't done much e-commerce. Or sorry, is it Magento? Yeah, or is it Magneto? No, it's Magento. But I have heard of Magento, and I've heard good things about it. I think it's based off PHP, and it's highly customizable, but you can build e-commerce sites. The other one that we've used at my company for like certain projects that weren't like full custom builds is WooCommerce, which is they have a plugin for WordPress. They might have plugins for other CMSs as well. So that's a thing. And then your other option is to use something like Shopify, which is kind of like a full service thing, because you not only you get a place to list all of your products. They have like payment integration. They also you can do like shipping integration and stuff like that. So all I will say is I don't have a ton of experience with e-commerce. If I had to build a site right now, I probably would just use Shopify because it seems so easy, and like they can also do all of the hosting for you, so you don't need to manage that. They manage all of your users. What's nice about Magento is you can self-host, but yeah, I don't know. Hopefully that helps. Here, and there's been some comments on that previous question, so let's read them. Yeah. How to create a custom page in Drupal with your forms and code. I haven't worked in Drupal in a very long time, but for those of you that don't know what Drupal is very similar to like WordPress or Joomla. It's a CMS. Or use the new offer to bump your pay at the current job. Yeah, exactly. So what we're talking about was people will jump between companies so that they can get a pay raise. But a lot of times what someone will do is go get an offer at another company and then use it as leverage at their current company to say, hey, I'm going to leave unless you match this offer that I got from another company. And Messiah is saying, unless it's a game company, then they throw you out the second you commit your code. I guess it depends on the company, but yeah. DS Legend says, in 30 years, I've jumped 14 times, mostly because I've become bored. Pay went up too. Then it was seen as unstable. Now it is seen as experienced. Going through interviews now, and each is interested because I've been in so many industries and roles. Yeah. And I think the thing is, like, after you've worked at that many companies and you have that much experience, you could get hired on to an like extremely like, I mean, it's a senior position, but I was gonna say an extremely senior position, more like a principal dev position, just because you have so much experience. I guess like a chief technology officer or something like that might be an extremely senior dev. But yeah, that's good to hear, DS Legends. Smiley Face says, I feel like the people at my company have been doing that. A bunch of people have been with us for about a year, a year and a half or so, and have been leaving to new jobs. I just hit my 1 year. I don't plan on leaving yet because I love the team and atmosphere. Yeah. And I think that's the other aspect of it is like, do you like the company? Do you like the people that you work with? Like, are you willing to stay there longer and keep working for that company and with those people? So, yeah. Maintaining an e-commerce website is just as much as work as having a physical store. Yeah, which is why I would pick something that's mostly full service, because I don't want to have to worry about server scaling and downtime and user management and stuff like that. At that point, you're just worried about running your business and selling your stuff. So, Inertia.js, never heard of it. Server-side rendering? Build single-page apps without building an API. What's PHP? Mixed with Vue. Whoa! Seems cool. I wonder how it's different from... what's the PHP that everyone uses with Vue? I'll see it in the chat in a second, but it's a really popular one. Shopify is built on GraphQL, so you can technically use whatever front end you want. Yeah, so you could use it almost like as a headless e-commerce CMS. Laravel, that's actually it. A lot of people use Laravel with Vue. And this is interesting to see because it's like PHP with Vue, but I guess it's not Laravel? I don't know. I just jumped jobs after 17 years. Well, we'd love to hear from you, Xejatel, because like that's the whole like opposite experience. Because you've just been at one place for so long, and you're so used to that company and the people you work with, and now all of a sudden, you're the new hire. That's crazy. Yeah, Laravel. That's it. Everybody said it. Laravel. Oh, that's crazy. So Coder's Gym is saying so. Inertia.js combines PHP and Vue. But vModel, which is typically what you use to bind your inputs to your data, that can sync to your database. Wow. Oh, wow. AcidSpark has worked for the same company since 1998. Wow. That's a long time. So is Inertia... Wait, what is this? So this is a Laravel site? Oh, so Inertia does use Laravel's router. Interesting. Interesting. Why is everyone focusing on jumping companies then starting with? I don't know. But yeah. Cool. Yeah, let us know, Xsiege, because that's an interesting experience to be for somewhere for so long and then change all of a sudden. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. All right. Let's keep answering questions. I forgot to mention this earlier, but if you have asked a question, type ! here in the chat, and your questions will bubble up. And we'll go with a non-subscriber question. From Matrix Codes, who says, how do you stick with one programming language and not hop from one to the next? I always feel like whichever language I choose is the wrong choice. I think the main thing is like your mentality of using that language, because a lot of times when someone switches to a new programming language, they're trying to use a lot of the paradigms that they used in the older programming language that they were used to. Let me just highlight this so we don't lose it. So a lot of people will jump into a new language with a lot of preconceived notions or a lot of wishes on how that language would work because they're so used to some other language. So I think the first thing is, like, when you're going into a new programming language, you should put all of your almost like all of your opinions aside, because that language might have its own way of doing something, and you have to learn that way rather than trying to fit your old way of doing it into the new programming language. So that's one thing to think about, is just like embrace that new language that you're in instead of like trying to make it like the old language that you were used to. And personally, I've been using JavaScript for years now. I was doing C# full time before that, but these days it's mainly all JavaScript with like a little bit of C#. So I don't hop very much. I potentially do hop between frameworks, but not really much, because like I mentioned before, I try to use the stuff that I like and that I'm comfortable with. Because regardless of what I choose, I can likely get the thing working or figure it out. I don't need some specific framework or language to do it for me, you know? So I don't know. Hopefully that helped. I'm a Dabul Howda is asking, what MacBook Pro do I have? I'll point you to the frequently asked questions, because I mentioned it there, as well as a ton of other questions that you might have. If you just search for MacBook, I have a mid 2015 MacBook Pro. What year is it? 2021? 6 years old. My MacBook is 6 years old, and it's still really great. I upgraded from a mid 2015 MacBook Pro that didn't have a dedicated graphics card to one that did. And honestly, I kind of prefer the old one because I run into weird issues every now and then, and also like fans spinning up. But it's still a good laptop. But yeah, check out the frequently asked questions here. Front end was easier in 98. Just one screen size to satisfy. Yeah. Was it like 480? 320 by 480? Freeze your habits. Yeah. Don't forget about your habits, because you might go back to that old language, but just put them on hold and embrace the new language. Embracement. Can I do a stream or explain the script of my favorite Gale? Was that a typo? What do you mean by that? There are only 28 questions. Yeah, so it now clears out. It only shows messages that were asked in the last 2 weeks. And that's mainly because I was building up a backlog of like hundreds of questions. I mean, you can see that we're at question number 2300 now. So yeah, it clears them out if they haven't been answered after 2 weeks. So you'd have to ask again. Yeah. How do you output your Mac into your streaming PC? I use a capture card. This too is answered on the frequently asked questions, but we haven't talked about it in a while, so I'll show you. Yeah, here it is. What do you use to live stream? But I swear it's been a really long time since we even talked about this. So first of all, if you're interested in all the equipment I use, check out coding.garden/gear. And I have it all here with Amazon affiliate links. So this is one way to support the stream, is by using these affiliate links, because I'll get a few pennies from Amazon. Also, if you don't want to click the affiliate link, you can click the direct link. But yeah, this is the MacBook that I use. This is describes the setup that's right in front of me right now. And then all of this is piped into a streaming computer. So this section describes that. This is the PC that I have running the stream. It's got a GTX 1060, Ryzen 5 quad core, 16 gigs of RAM, terabyte hard drive, and a 240 gigabyte SSD. This is currently the thing running OBS and piping the stream out to Twitch. But how do I take what I see on my MacBook screen and put it into this computer so it can send it to Twitch? I use a capture card. And I'll show you that here. Yeah, so this Elgato HD60. So basically, I plug the HDMI from my laptop into this Elgato. This thing plugs via USB into the computer, and then it shows up in OBS, so I can choose it. I actually have two different ones. So I have one of these, and I use it for my HD camera. So like any HDMI device you could plug into this. So like a DSLR camera or a DVD player, if you want to do literally anything that has HDMI. And so that my camera has HDMI out. But I recently got this, and it just plugs into PCI Express, but it works the same way instead of working over USB. Cool. There's a bunch of other stuff, but here's the thing. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, it is explained in clear detail. So I'm actually pretty proud of this diagram. I like the style, the simplicity, but like I said, so I'm on this laptop. If I'm ever like playing videos on the laptop, I actually just plug a cable from the headphone jack into an audio mixer. That audio mixer has USB out, and that goes into the streaming computer. Like I mentioned, the HDMI out gets plugged into the capture card. The capture card plugs in via USB, and then similarly, the camera has HDMI out, which goes into another capture card, which is USB input. And then also this, which used to be in frame. This mic used to be like right here, but now I put it here, which I like better. But that is XLR into the mixer, which also pipes it out via USB. So check this out here. Hats off to a good diagram. Well, thank you. I used Figma to create it. Am I still getting OS updates? Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I'm still on Mojave. I probably should upgrade to whatever the other one is, but I technically can upgrade to the latest OS X right now. And what's up, Electrothermal? Happy Friday. Programming languages feeling wrong makes me think you want to explore more languages to fit your personal style. Yeah, for sure. What do I use for my own sound output? What do you mean by that? I'm a little bit behind on chat, so I'm going to catch up, and then we'll go back to answering questions. Have I thought about creating a course? Yeah, and in the future, I want to create a lot of courses. But right now, I'm about to do a free course sponsored by the Young Leaders of America initiative. And that actually will be a good testing ground for the eventual like paid courses that I would want to do. Yeah, what's the name of the menu bar program? That also is in the frequently asked questions. So the thing is, in the past, I would get mad if people kept asking frequently asked questions, but I think it's been so long that since people have asked frequently asked questions that I'm okay with it. Let's talk about it. The thing in the menu bar is called iStat. Yeah. And I use version 5. I think they're like on version 6. But I use version 5 because I paid for it. And to go to version 6, I'd have to buy a new license. But it's really customizable. You can add all kinds of stuff and get all kinds of monitors and stuff like that. Cool. Yeah. Explain the stream your favorite game, but in vanilla JavaScript. That would be fun. The thing is, I don't really have a favorite game. Maybe Rocket League. I mean, right now though, it's probably the Pokemon trading card game. Even though that's technically like a digitized version of a physical card game, but I play that for like multiple hours a day, and I have been for months now. Yeah, we might do that eventually, Veritatas. Right now, it's organized by subscribers first, then non-subs, and within that, they're organized by the oldest question is at the top. Yeah. There's a disturbing offset to some of the arrowheads. Come on. Come on. Are you kidding me? Oh, I see it. Like maybe this one doesn't seem perfectly centered, or this one. Okay, I agree. They're like slightly not on the line, so like this is longer or shorter than that one. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's been a little bit longer, The Real Python. I was streaming for probably 6 months before I enabled affiliate. So a little over 2 years now. But what's up, The Real Python? And let me just acknowledge all the stuff that's happened. Smiley Face with the 7 months. Thank you very much. Weird Divide with the 8. Mark Boots with the 6. Okay, Not Now with the 15 months. Limotes with the 13. The Real Python with the 18. And the Time with that gift to Sniper Snow Sniping. Thank you for the gift. I use a mixer to combine my work and personal PC into a single headset. Yeah, you could do that. 2 inputs. Yeah. What is Web 3.0? I saw devs posting about it on Twitter. I think I've heard of Web 2.0, and this was like the dawn of like HTML5 and stuff like that, I believe. Maybe not. I mean, Wikipedia is saying Web 2.0 refers to websites that emphasize user-generated content, ease of use, participatory culture, and interoperability. Nobody uses this term anymore. And then what's Web 3.0? Blockchain? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. But what is it? Semantic, artificial intelligence, 3D graphics, ubiquitous. I think they just want to put a name on it. I mean, this just seems like I'd just call it the modern web. Oh, I see what someone was asking. How am I hearing? Yeah, I actually have little speakers right here. These little guys. I used to wear headphones, but they were uncomfortable or they would fall out. So anytime like a notification sound happens, it's coming out of these speakers, and that's plugged into the output of my mixer. Yeah. Can you say course and curse? It's tricky for me. Course, curse, curse, course. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Scenic Nikolov is asking, can you share with us a bit about your health habits? I have none. Oh yeah, like I actually joined a gym last week. I'm trying to get in shape, but I don't watch what I eat. I don't get enough sleep. I go to bed really late. I eat a lot of sugar. I don't stretch. I barely ever work out. I don't take as much breaks as I should. Basically, I know what I should do to be healthy, but I'm not. I'm not healthy. but I want to be, because I'm getting older, and the older you get, the harder it is to maintain a lifestyle like that. So yeah. I'm excited for Pokemon TCG Live. If we're talking about Pokemon, I know that when it was first announced, that's like a rough opinion, but I like the idea of not having to trade for the cards that I need. IRL stream from the gym? No. I don't even like going there to begin with. It smells weird, and the gym that I signed up for whatever reason, no one is wearing masks. Which I guess like kind of makes sense, because like people are like, I don't want to wear a mask, it's hard to work out, but still the Delta variant is what's the word? Rampant. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know the real Pygon. You should friend me on there. We can play. I was playing with Chad last night. Ched in the chat. Explain Pokemon in JavaScript. I could. Yeah. That's what I wanted to do. Acid Spark is like, so I had this diagram, and I was like, how can I just create diagrams like this all the time? Because this was a while back that I created this, but when I created it, I was like, everything is just inputs and outputs. Literally, you could diagram anything as a series of inputs and outputs. Everything. and I like this style of doing it. I don't know. Yeah. What kind of project management do you prefer? Anything like agile, like Kanban is nice when you have a small team and you're just like trying to get features out, but you don't really have like sprints or too much of a deadline. And then Scrum is good for teams of like 3 or more. Is there a picture of my streaming desk? Not a recent one. Okay, what Web3 Foundation? Is this about Web 3.0? Yeah, I guess the decentralized web. Here's the thing. All the people that are into like crypto and stuff like that are trying to coin the phrase Web 3.0, but I don't think they have the authority to do that, because they're trying to say like that's the next big thing when it may or may not be. Like it could be that everything's going to be decentralized. I mean, and it would be nice, but I don't see it happening anytime soon. And for them to coin the phrase and label it on their own thing, I don't know if they can do that. I'm in perfect shape. Here's the thing. You only see me from here down. You don't see my big belly. So it's an illusion of the stream. I'm a little tubby. And I guess if you look at the stream over time, my face is chubbier than it used to be. I don't know. And also my beard doesn't help. That makes me look even chubbier. I don't know. We'll figure out something to do with channel points. All right, I'm behind on chat. We need to start answering questions again, though. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great point, DS Legends. So DS Legends is saying change it now while you can in terms of your health, bodily health. It's not just the inability to maintain it later, it's the irreversible damage that you then have to live with, for sure. I know I need to do something, and I'm on the verge of doing something. So yeah. I'm actually, I looked into the Denver Bouldering Club. I'm just not joining right now because like I'm having issues with my wrists, so I'm like not in the best condition. I'm a I need to take care of myself, but my wrists aren't in the best condition right now, so I can't really do any climbing. But eventually, I think I'll join the Denver Bouldering Club because it seems cool. Yeah. All right, we're going to scroll through all these and answer some more questions because we've only answered a couple. All right. If you've asked a question, type exclamation mark here in the chat. It'll bubble up. Should I avoid using position in CSS? No. I mean, position relative, position absolute makes sense sometimes. You shouldn't use it for everything. But yeah. Okay, we'll answer. I answered the Shibas question, so we're gonna answer the Time's question. I didn't answer this one, but I answered another one earlier. Am I hyped for Nux 3? I didn't even know Nux 3 was coming out, but let's take a moment to learn about it. New features. It's lighter, faster, hybrid. It has suspense. Oh, that's cool. It uses the composition API. That excites me because I know I tried building a Nuxt app and then I didn't realize that it didn't support the composition API yet. So yes, I'm excited. I'm excited to combine the composition API with server-side rendering. PJ Keller is asking, how can you convince your very old school company to allow you to use new technologies for projects? I'd say from experience, what worked for me was to do it without asking and then just showing them the results. I've talked about this before on stream, but it's really hard to convince someone or to get buy-in when whatever you have like already works. But if you can show that, hey, I put this thing together, it only took me 3 days of my spare time, and look at what we can do with it. That's how you can convince people. Now, obviously, like that would take your own. It would be on your own time that you'd have to do that. Like you wouldn't necessarily even get company time to do that. But if you really want to, that's what I had to do. So yeah, so PJ Keller is saying, would that be on your own time or work time? Yeah, I guess it depends. Like you could ask like, hey, I really want to use this and I want to show you that it will work well. So can I have 2 hours a week to work on this? Which is also like hard to convince a manager of because they're like, no, I want you to spend those 2 hours on the existing app. So likely it would have to be outside of work time. Yeah, and you technically, you could get like a proof of concept approved or something like that, like an exploratory thing, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's the benefit for you is you now have other things on your resume and experience in other things. But the benefit for the company is potentially like faster development time. They potentially will appeal to more developers when they're hiring because they're using like newer technologies. And pretty often newer technologies make things easier to build. They give you like a better developer experience. So there are benefits to the company as well. It's just a matter of like the initial investment of learning that technology or putting taking the risk of using that technology instead of what they already know and use. Yeah, I mean, DS Legends has the same point. So just build a prototype. Some of my best gigs resulted from rebuilding old tech with the new and showing it off. Yeah, and it influences far more than talking. Exactly. Like you could try to convince someone all day, but if you have a working thing that you can just show them, put it right in front of them, that might actually convince them. Yeah, and that's also what I'm saying. That the Time is like, by building that prototype, you'll see how much more efficient you are, how much you can get done with that newer thing. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, see that, and that's the other thing is, so I had to fight with my manager for 2 weeks to let us use 2 hours a week for writing tests. That's the thing. The business usually doesn't want to pay for development that isn't directly feature work. Now it depends. It depends on what kind of company you work at. But a lot of times that's what will end up happening is all of the focus will be shifted to pushing features rather than pushing automated tested features. I don't know. You can use new tech in an old stack. You can have view app with an API. Yeah, like a slight migration or a slight merging of the old and the new. Yeah. I mean, I could take this job because I've used all three. I would say I'm really good with Vue and React, and I could get good with Angular, but it is a lot to ask for someone to do all three. It's not normal for someone to be able to switch between all three like that. What do you need to know to start learning Vue? I would say the basics of JavaScript, HTML and CSS. That's about it. You don't need much to learn Vue. Yeah. Yep. Eudaimonia is saying, I'm a senior leadership and can attest to the business focus on future work. Yeah. I mean, and it makes sense. Like, you want your developers to be working on things that are going to make you money. But it's always the balance between, yeah, okay, we can push features now, but we'll potentially introduce bugs. We'll not have a test suite, so that way when we introduce new features later, there might be regressions or bugs. And by putting that work in now to write those tests, that'll prevent us from having to do that work in the future. That's actually a hard sell to the business because they want the features now. Yeah, and that's a good, I guess, like, contrarian view. Not contrarian, but it's a good thing to think about. Deepak is saying, it's worth considering that new technologies mean that other teams or that team members need to learn it and be able to support it. Yeah, so you introduce this new thing, and now all the developers who knew the old thing have to learn the new thing. So that's a downside because you have downtime because people need to train and learn the stuff. And then, yeah, if you're the only person that knows how to use that thing, then that's a risk to the business because it's a single point of failure. Like if you leave the company or something like that. So yeah, it's two sides of the coin, but good luck with that, PJ Keller. Hopefully you can get something going. All right, if you've asked a question, type exclamation mark here in the chat. It'll bubble up. And I probably need to take like a quick break. I know that I have lunch waiting for me that's getting cold right now. Do the M1 Macs interest you? No, I would say probably when this MacBook dies, I'm gonna get a laptop that runs Linux. That's where my mind is going. Because I'm tired of all the stuff. I mean, at the same time though, like, I mean, one of the main reasons of having a MacBook is because if you want to build iOS apps, you need a MacBook to build it. Even if you use like something cross-platform, the iOS app itself needs to be compiled on a Mac. So that's always something to consider. But there are like build services. So yeah. Yeah, and System 76 is based in Denver. They're really cool. They build laptops specifically to run Linux, and they come preloaded with Pop! OS, which is their variant, but they used to come preloaded with Ubuntu. System 76 is really cool. Yeah, I'll definitely consider them when I'm getting a laptop. But fun story, System 76 used to allow you to mail them a self-addressed stamped envelope, and then they would mail you back free stickers, powered by Ubuntu stickers. Yeah, the days of self-addressed stamped envelopes. So you send them an envelope with a stamp on it, and then they'll send you back these stickers that say powered by Ubuntu. I did that when I was in college, and I put it on my laptop, which had Ubuntu running on it. Cool. Yeah, and in terms of like the newer tech, what the Shibas is mentioning is if you don't see Lombok, I don't know what that is, but I guess it has to do with Spring because not everyone has caught on yet. Yeah, I think that's a good game plan, PJ Keller, is like a small project or a small little piece and then try to implement it with new tech. Yeah, the Real Polygon is saying it's primarily that they don't account for the future cost of development when there isn't automated testing, especially when it's hard to quantify the cost of future failures. Find a way to quantify the cost, and it's easier to make the argument. How many bugs have been fixed over the years for the same feature? Yeah. Yeah. But humans are really bad at thinking long term, thinking into the future. They more care about now. So, but yes, if you've already gone that route and you're at a point where, hey, we really need to be writing tests now, you can make that argument that, look, every time we deploy something, we have all these bugs because we don't have automated tests. Yeah. 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 Akira is saying their company works with technology from the 80s, and tried to convince them that that older technology is better than the new technology. I think all the people trying to convince you are just worried about their jobs because they've been there a very long time. They don't know anything else or anything better. Powered by JavaScript. Do they have those stickers? By the way, that sticker powered by Ubuntu was funny back in the day because most laptops, I don't know if they still do, had to have like a powered by Windows sticker. And so like I scratched that sticker off and put on the powered by Ubuntu sticker. Framework is DIY laptops, so I'll have to look into it. Yeah. All the new devs are. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's another like threat to the business if they don't embrace newer technology is they can't hire newer devs because nobody knows or wants to work with the thing that they're using. So yeah. I don't have any of these, but I used to have them. You know how you'd get the free so back in the day, it wasn't as easy to just download 4 gigabytes of an operating system. So you could get an Ubuntu install CD. Yeah, I remember that. I have no idea, Sledgedog. And I'm not familiar with the influencer Bredin. I don't know. Nice. Titan Fuss, who says, we just officially stopped supporting IE. Woohoo! Everyone in the chat, throw the rip for IE, but also the little celebration for the fact that Titan Fuss doesn't have to support IE anymore. Powered by Micromedia Flash. Yeah. TypeScripty question. Ask the Frightened Panda. Ask this question with exclamation mark ask, because I'll try to get to it, because we actually haven't written any code yet. So that seems like a code-ish question that I could code. But in the chat, do exclamation mark ask followed by all of this, and it'll pop up here, so don't lose it. Friend of mine is 24 and recently had to learn COBOL. Yeah, I mean COBOL is still used like in the finance industry. So it's not going anywhere anytime soon, at least in that industry. What's IE? Is that a joke? Internet Explorer. The bane of most web developers' existence. The bane of their existence. This thing. Not Edge, because IE Edge is basically just Chrome with a nice little IE icon on it. But Internet Explorer, I think the last version was like version 11, just notoriously did not have support for a lot of the newer features. If you look at caniuse.com, like for example, I think like array map, yeah, was support, like, so the map data structure was supported in IE 11. Search for array map. Yeah, I guess IE9 was one of the first to support all of the higher order methods. So, but this is the thing, like older versions of IE don't have support for a lot of features that we want to use. Okay, no worries, Sledgedog. Yeah. Yeah. Lots of people stopping support for IE. Except that Edge implements the Trident rendering engine for backwards compatibility. Yeah. But it's using the V8 JavaScript. And so the JavaScript feature parity is there with Chrome. But then they just render different things differently. Recreate IE6 user interface in Electron for the nostalgia. I'm about it. That would be fun. Throw that on the ideas, so I don't forget it. Okay, I'm gonna take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back to try and answer like a more code-related question, one where I can like show code examples, and we'll actually write some code. But surprisingly, I've only been live for 1 hour and 20 minutes. It feels longer than that, but we're gonna be live for a little bit longer. I'll put on a video while I'm gone. Actually, I'm going to take a 15-minute break because I'm just going to eat my lunch. But while I'm gone, I'll leave you with a video. Let's figure out what video I'm going to leave you with. It feels like 15 minutes. Let's see. You can do some work while I'm gone. Great. Let's find... Oh, I could do the open source one. Yeah. The only thing is the description of open source. My mic was really blown out, so it's not the best audio quality on that one. But I could do how to contribute to open source. Let's do that one. In honor of Hacktoberfest. We're going to do how to contribute out. So this is a really long video, but we'll choose like one section. So there's a bunch of timestamps. We'll probably start here. What are the steps to begin contributing? And then, yeah, up until we actually... So the first half of this video is just describing in general, like what is open source and how to contribute. And then the second half is me literally trying to contribute to something, which... didn't go that well, but we'll watch this video. Okay, so yeah, let's do it. But let me create kind of like what are we gonna do? What are the first steps? So step one, we should like okay. I'm gonna go eat my lunch, but I'm gonna leave you with this video. We should like find a kind of like awesome. Okay, but I'll be back soon. Don't go too far, and hopefully you'll learn something about open source. See you soon. Oh, wrong thing. Okay, so yeah, let's do it. But let me create kind of like what are we gonna do? What are the first steps? So step one, we should like find a project. Step two is read the community guidelines, or I think it's usually called like the code of conduct. Read the contribution guides. So typically every open source project will have a code of conduct. So that is, it's typically just like be nice to each other, that kind of thing. But you want to make sure that you adhere to that because part of this whole open source thing is you're collaborating with people all over the world on the web. And you need to make sure that you're nice about doing that. The next thing is reading the contribution guidelines. So typically if a project is large enough, they'll actually have a document that describes how does this project work? Like, how do you submit an issue? How do you create a pull request? Those types of things. We'll also need to read the development setup guide. So most projects, again, will have a guide on how do you get this project up and running locally to start contributing to it. because that's typically what you'll need to do. It's on GitHub, but you'll need to bring it down. You'll need to potentially create a branch, start working on it. All of that about the flow and workflow and everything should be in the contribution guidelines, and we'll get the development set up locally. So yeah, read the contribution guidelines, read the development setup guide, and so you get set up locally based on that. Then after we've done that, we're going to need to find an issue. Find an issue to work on. So typically, if you're dealing with a GitHub project, there is the issue tracker here. And depending on the size of the project, there may be hundreds of issues, there may be very few issues, but this is really where you want to look to see what can I work on. I'll talk about this when we get there, but typically most projects have labels on them. And so there's things like a good first issue. This might be where you want to start. Sometimes that's as simple as like a documentation fix or something like that. But the maintainers of the project try to keep things labeled in this way so that if you're totally new to this kind of thing, it's really easy for you to like pick that issue and kind of get up and going. Okay, so we find an issue to work on. I would probably say add a comment to the issue to say that you are working on it. And this is mainly just so that you don't duplicate work. Let's word wrap this. So, and again, because something like this is so asynchronous, like there's people all over the world working on it, somebody could already be working on this, but maybe they just haven't submitted a comment. I like to, just so that other people know that, hey, someone's working on this. So I have internet, but somehow the laptop is disconnected. Give me a second. Well, hello. Welcome in, Raiders. Welcome, Instafluff. I'm actually on a break, but then my internet stopped working on this thing. But I think I fixed it. There we go. So I'm letting you all watch a video on how to contribute to open source while I eat my lunch. But welcome in. What were you working on, Instafluff? Let's see. Gardic phone. What is that? Huh. Well, welcome in, Raiders. Yeah, so for October, Hacktoberfest. So for anyone that is not familiar with Hacktoberfest, this is a yearly thing put on by DigitalOcean. I don't know Gardic phone now, but this is put on every year by DigitalOcean that tries to get more people into contributing to open source. And if you open 4 pull requests in the month of October, you'll get a free t-shirt from DigitalOcean. So that's a thing right now. And for those of you that have no idea what open source is at all, that's why I'm playing that video behind us. Yeah. Cool. I'm going to look up Gardic phone because I've never heard of it. Oh, the telephone game. Oh, we should probably play this. Cool. All right. I'm going to continue on my break. Thank you, everyone, for rating. If you don't want to watch a video, that's totally fine. Carry about your day. But I'll be back in about 10 or 15 minutes to answer code questions and stuff like that. All right. See you soon. We should find a project. Read the call the open project up and running locally. I think add a comment to the issue to say that you are working on it. And this is mainly just so that you don't duplicate work. Let's word wrap this. So, and again, because something like this is so asynchronous, like there's people all over the world working on it, somebody could already be working on this, but maybe they just haven't submitted a comment. I like to, just so that other people know that, hey, someone's working on this. And potentially, if they want to help or work on it as well, they know to look at my fork of the project to see potentially any work that I've done. So add a comment to an issue, say that you're working on it. Begin working. Then we'll submit a pull request and then go from there. I'm sure we'll expand out this to-do a little bit as we move along. And if you have any questions in the chat about any one of these things, please ask them. We'll try to talk about all this stuff in depth. And I think that's kind of it. Let's catch up. Hello, Vatutas. Hello, Giorgio from Spain. Welcome. Harsh is saying, I'm also planning to make an open source project on making a real world website for a fake restaurant. Interesting. It will have admin panels, blog, recipe app, and more. It will help me in managing that project. Thanks. Yeah, and so this isn't exactly going to be a stream on how to make your own project open source and do this kind of thing, but you definitely can look at some of the more popular projects out there to see how do they do it. Like, how do they get random internet people to start contributing to their code base? Cool. Hello, memes. Welcome back. Harsh asks, how can I make a code of conduct? Just a few quick tips. Honestly, you can just copy and paste their code of conduct. That's actually what I did for our Discord. So the Discord channel, whenever you join, there's actually a code of conduct and I think a link to the code of conduct. But I took the code of conduct from the P5JS organization and kind of just adjusted it slightly to fit Coding Garden. And that's totally okay to do. And I'm sure you can find a lot of different examples of code of conducts out there. Cool. Hexception says, I'm sitting here while I wait for my very, very big Java project to compile to test. Have you seen that XKCD comic? Code is compiling. I used to have this printed out in my workspace at my very first job. The #1 programmer excuse for legitimately slacking off. my code's compiling. Hey, get back to work. Compiling. Oh, carry on. Yeah. Yeah, Memes ask, what is this stream about? We are going to attempt to contribute to the P5.js web editor live, and we're going to show how all that will work. Hello, Carlos, who's from Colombia. That's awesome. Welcome. Aaron is asking, will you be answering off-topic questions on the stream? Potentially, but I also don't want to get off track because I have already streamed for like over 2 hours today. Yeah. And Linus, thanks for backing me up. Pretty much the same thing. It wouldn't hurt to ask it. I just may not answer it. Okay. So here we go. The first step is to find a project. There are tons out there. I mean, actually, GitHub has this Explore feature. This is just like very popular open source projects. I mean, I think typically the things that people contribute to are things that they actually use themselves. It doesn't have to be that way, especially if you're trying to just practice coding or practice collaborating. You can really attempt to contribute to anything, but a lot of times that's what keeps the open source world going around. Someone is using a particular open source project or library or framework, and it has a bug in it that they need to fix for their own project. So they go in and submit a pull request to fix that type of thing. So there are tons of open source projects on there. GitHub has this Explore feature. You can also check out GitLab. I'm sure they have a very similar thing. Because it's not just specific to GitHub. GitHub is one of the most popular things out there, and it's what a lot of people use to collaborate, but it's not the only thing. There are other stuff. So there's GitLab. Let's click Explore on here. Yeah, and we can see some trending repos. We can see repos that have the most stars. So really, the first step of finding a project is really just find something that interests you, find something that you're already working in or working on, and then you can go from there. So for this particular thing, I'm going to attempt to contribute to the P5.js web editor. So I found my project. Step one, done. I think someone mentioned I didn't have checkboxes, and you are correct. So let's add some checkboxes. Yep, and I guess I'll also mention, I mean, it kind of goes without saying, but the project should probably be in a language that you know or you're learning. It should be something that you're somewhat familiar with. It wouldn't make sense for me to go to some open source C++ project and attempt to make a pull request. I could, because I maybe know a little bit of C++, but it's not my main area of expertise. So I would look for something that I already know. And this is a React JavaScript project. I do that daily, so I should be able to help. Okay, next step. Read the code of conduct. So if we look at the repo, and actually I would start with just like read the README. Before you go any further, let's look at the README. Let's see what it says, because it's going to have links to all of these other things. So let's look at the README. So they describe the P5.js web editor. That's great. They talk about issues. So please post bugs and feature requests in the correct repository. So the P5.js web editor is specifically this application, which is a web editor for editing P5. There are P5.js libraries like the P5 DOM, the sound library, the accessibility library, and those are actually separate projects and separate GitHub repos. So this is just telling you, hey, if you want to contribute to those or if you have issues for those, you should go to those specific projects, as it's not directly related to P5.js web editor. Okay. Cool. So they have a get involved section. This is great because that's what I want to do. I want to get involved. And it says the P5.js web editor is a collaborative project created by many individuals, and you are invited to help. All types of involvement are welcome. You can start with the P5.js community section, which also applies to this project. So let's go to it. Developers check the developer docs, details about contributing code, bug fixes, and documentation. To start writing code, a great place to start is the development guide. So this is great. So this is an awesome open source project in that in their README, they're linking me to all the places I need to go to be able to contribute. So that's awesome. Let's just see, like in the code repo here, do they have a code of conduct? Let's see. Yeah, I don't see a code of conduct directly, but it's probably because it's under the P5 umbrella. So the code of conduct for the P5JS Foundation is most likely the code of conduct for this particular project. So let's check out this community tab, like it told me to. So P5JS is a community interested in exploring the creation of art and design with technology. That's great. All the people, they like these hashtags. We're not code snobs. So this is kind of like a code of conduct. We're not code snobs. We do not assume knowledge or imply there are things that somebody should know. We insist on actively engaging with requests for feedback, regardless of their complexity. We welcome newcomers and prioritize the education of others. We strive to approach all tasks with the enthusiasm of a newcomer because we believe that newcomers are just as valuable in this effort as experts. We consistently make the effort to actively recognize and validate multiple types of contributions, and we are always willing to offer help or guidance. This is great. So yeah, and this is really just about the community itself. And it's kind of like a code of conduct. Let's see if, or the Processing Foundation has a code of conduct. Well, there's the OpenStack code of conduct. The JS Foundation has a code of conduct. Cool. So this is not specific to P5JS, but someone in the chat did ask a question of like, I want to start an open source project. Where do I get my code of conduct? As I mentioned, you can just look at existing ones and pick and choose from there and create your own. So OpenStack has a code of conduct. You can look at that one. The JS Foundation has a code of conduct. You could potentially use that one. And typically they all have very similar things like be friendly and patient, be welcoming, be considerate, be respectful, be careful with your wording. When we disagree, try and understand why. I think the thing about open source projects is that people are literally spending their spare time, their free time, on this project. And so if you come in with a hostile attitude of like, hey, this feature doesn't exist, do it right now, and you're not respectful to the people working on it, that just hurts them. It makes the open source contributors feel bad and potentially not want to even contribute to this thing in the first place. So, I mean, the code of conduct doesn't only apply to people that are actively contributing code. It's people that are submitting bugs or making feature requests, because we all need to be a nice community and communicate effectively to keep that community going and keep the project going. So that's the code of conduct. Let's see. This is the advocacy for the Processing Foundation. Let's see. It's not exactly the code of conduct, but I think you get the idea, and I think especially this community tab is a bit of a code of conduct for when we're contributing to this project. So step 2 is done. We read the README. We saw everything that they had to offer. We also noticed that they linked us to contribution guidelines and development documentation, so we can use that in a bit, so that's great. We read their community guide and potentially their code of conduct if they have it. We want to make sure that we're adhering to that. We're being nice and open. We're not going to be forceful. I'm not going to make a pull request and say, hey, accept this pull request right now. I'm going to make the pull request and say, hey, I tried to fix this. I'd like a code review. You're all wonderful. You're doing great work. Thank you. So we can go on from there. All right, let's catch up on the chat and then we'll keep moving. Infi says, I would totally do a super chat, but my YouTube app refuses to try opening the dialogue. That's fine. I appreciate the thought. Linus says, I love GitLab. GitLab is cool. Yeah, Danielle says, basically, don't be a jerk. Yeah, just be nice. Be nice. Cool. All right. Next up is reading the contribution guidelines. So we saw in the README that they have developer docs and development guide. I think their developer docs, yeah, these are kind of like contribution guidelines because it has ultimately preparing a pull request. Let's see the development docs. We have installation, tests, designs, technologies. Let's look at preparing a pull request. Yeah. So, I mean, these are pretty much our contribution guidelines. So they're nice enough to actually break down how does Git work and how do all these Git commands work and how do you make a pull request. But it's essentially telling us like how are we going to submit our changes for review once we actually do submit them. So that's great. And then these other things are actually like getting it set up locally, which is what I'm going to attempt to do next. Yeah, and then this is just a good breakdown of what they're actually using. So they're using React because I've looked at the code. I know that for sure. But they're using ES6 for common and reusable styles. Write object-oriented SCSS or SAS. The project doesn't use CSS modules, styled components, or other CSS and JS libraries, but it does use SAS. BEM guidelines and naming conventions are followed. So if you are contributing potentially some style changes, you want to make sure that you adhere to BEM guidelines and object-oriented SAS. So that's good to know in terms of contributing. For reference to the JavaScript style guide, see the Airbnb style guide and the React ESLint plugin. So when I pull this down locally, my editor should have all of that up and running for me. But that's another thing for contribution guidelines. With like the code that I write should adhere to the Airbnb style guide. And I'm going to run a linter on the code. I'm sure that they have a linting task, which will check that. And that ultimately will just allow the pull request review process to go a lot smoother, because when I submit that pull request, I'm going to make sure that my code adheres to all of their guidelines. Cool. They're using Jest for unit tests and snapshot testing with Enzyme. Awesome. So I think that's pretty good. I'm getting a good idea of how to contribute to this thing. So we'll check that off. And now we're going to do the development setup guide. So installation, a guide for setting up your development environment. Let's check it out. Follow these instructions to set up your development environment, which you need to do before you start contributing code to this project. So they have manual installation, which is probably what I can do because I do have Node and I can clone it down and start it up. And then they also have Docker setup. I think to make this guide more accessible, I'm just going to do the local setup because that's what most people will do. Docker is actually really cool and would probably be simpler, but not everyone has Docker. Some people are on Windows. It's not as easy. We'll do the manual setup. So first thing we need to do is fork the repository. So I didn't mention it here, but let's actually add it as something that we need to do, which is fork the repository. So let's do that here. So when you go to the project on GitHub, you will see this fork button. And what the fork button does is it makes a complete copy of this repo on your own personal account. And what that allows you to do is make changes like crazy, and you're not affecting the main one. Right now, I wouldn't be able to anyways because they have permissions set up where I can't modify this. So a fork is going to be a copy that I can modify. And then later on, a pull request is basically a request that says, I made a change on my copy. Will you please merge it into your main one so that way we can fix a bug or have a new feature? So I'm going to make a fork. Let's click on it. I belong to a lot of organizations, but I'm just going to fork it under my personal account. And it's going to do what it needs to do. Andreas is saying, teach us Docker on a future stream. I definitely will, because like I mentioned earlier, I'm becoming to love Docker. Cool. Okay, so the fork completed, and we can now see, if we look at the URL, I'm now under my user account, and then it has the P5.js web editor. So this is a complete and total copy under my username, and it's actually like separate from the main one. It does say that I forked it, but now because it's under my account, I can change this code all day, yeah, it'll just work, at least locally on my copy. Ultimately, what we're going to do is submit a pull request so those changes can make their way back into the main repo. But for now, I have my own copy, so that's great. So now that I have a copy, I'm actually going to clone this one. So let's do it. I'm in this folder. I'm just going to say git clone, and it should clone it down. Cool. So I've cloned it. It says navigate into the project folder and install all of the necessary dependencies with npm. I think I can do that. So let's go into that folder. And then I'll just do npm I, and that's going to download all of the dependencies. So if you've ever worked in a React project or a Node project, it has this package JSON, which lists all of the dependencies like React and ESLint and stuff like that. And so now I'm downloading all of those locally so I can run this project locally. Oh, Infi is saying, Docker is surprisingly painless on Windows. That's good to hear. I think it's a more recent development, especially with like the Ubuntu subsystem on Docker on Windows. I don't know if it uses that, but it's interesting because Docker is a containerization technology, and which essentially means it's creating like a small version of your operating system right next to your operating system. And typically Docker containers are like Linux images. So on Windows, I think before it had to actually put things in a virtual machine. Maybe it can do it natively now, but yeah, so that's good to know. Cool. Andreas asked a question, if you pull from origin, where would you be pulling from? In this case, if I do a git remote -v, my origin is set up to be my specific copy of the repo. And that's because I did a git clone. When you do a git clone, the origin is set up to be the thing that you cloned it from. So if I wanted to add a remote in here, which is the like official P5 project on GitHub, I could do that. And then anytime I wanted to pull in the latest changes, which are going to be on the main repo, I could actually pull from there. And it is good to note that once you make a fork, it is now actually like it's a snapshot in time, it's a copy. And so if any changes happen on the main repo, you actually need to bring those changes in. It's not going to happen automatically. So what I'll show and when we're contributing, what I'll show is that before you do make a pull request, you're going to want to make sure that you have all of the latest code locally, so that way you don't run into any merge conflicts or anything like that. Okay, so we installed the dependencies. Install MongoDB and make sure that it's running. So I already have MongoDB installed with Brew. I need to just start it up and make sure that it's running. So let's do it. MongoDB is already started. Cool, so I should be good there. This next item says copy env.example to .env. So if you're new to Node, the .env file has environment variables inside of it. So let's open this up. And we can look at the .env.example. So there are a lot of environment variables in here. And essentially, I need to make a copy of this and then update all of the variables to get it running locally. I potentially won't have to update all of them because I'm not getting the full thing up and working. I really need to just focus on whatever feature that I'm going to be working on, and we'll figure that out in a second. But I do need to create a .env file so that it knows to look at that. Okay, so we're going to copy .env.example to the .env file. Cool. Update .env with necessary keys to enable certain app behaviors. Example, GitHub ID, GitHub secret, if I want to be able to log in with GitHub. I may need to do that later if I'm dealing with a feature that requires a user to be logged in. But for now, I'm just going to leave it as is. And then when I'm ready, I can go add, this one, the .env. I can go update it later if I need to. Okay. npm run fetch examples. So this video is really long. I need to create like a shorter, more consumable version because obviously this is me doing the thing, contributing to open source, which isn't fast. It takes work. But if you do want to continue watching this video, you can use this link here. And what I might try to do today is make a shorter version of that video because it is Hacktoberfest. Cool. So there's that. And hi everyone. No, that was Andreas asked what year that was. Let's see. 2019. Yeah, 2 years ago. Wow. All right, I'm back, and we're gonna try to write some code. So if you have a question, !ask followed by your question in the chat. That'll show up here. I'm going to pick one right now, and we're going to try and write some code because we haven't written any code today. Just a second, though. I'm trying to figure out a thing. Oh yeah, and Gitsum is asking about Elasticsearch. I don't have any plans of doing that right now, but I think it would be a good topic. But yeah. We've never really done anything on like search or indexing, so that would be a fun topic to cover. Okay, so if you've asked a question, type ! here. Those questions will bubble up. I'm going to do a speed run. Oh, it shows them as... let's see if I refresh. I think I have to fix the removing logic of the questions. I'll have to work on that another time. Yeah, I'm going to do a speed run and answer any of the quick ones, and then I'm gonna write some code. Okay. Thoughts on SOAP versus REST versus GraphQL versus gRPC. Yeah, so SOAP is... I don't even remember what it stands for. But before REST APIs, most APIs were SOAP. Simple Object Access Protocol. And it typically involved XML, though I think you can have a SOAP API that uses JSON. Maybe, I don't know. It typically involved XML. Early in my career, this is pretty much the only APIs I saw were SOAP APIs. But these days, simple. Yeah, but these days it's like REST-ish APIs are the more common ones. Because what's also interesting is if you look up like REST APIs, representational state transfer, REST actually has a very specific meaning. And there is like a specification and a paper written on REST. And these days, some APIs, even though they're HTTP JSON APIs, they're not necessarily exactly following the REST specification. But that's a thing. Representational state transfer. And then the other one mentioned GraphQL. Yeah, I mean, a couple of years ago, this was the new hotness. These days, it's fairly standard at companies that are doing like a lot of React, or if you're using something like Gatsby, which comes built in with GraphQL. It's also another interesting concept. And then gRPC is a remote procedure call. I don't know if there's something specific about it, but at the end of the day, like making HTTP requests, you're like technically executing a function on a remote computer. So you're kind of, yeah, it's basically what you're doing when your REST API is making a response. So that's the thing. All right, this is not the best coverage of all of these. My opinions, I like just building HTTP APIs that receive JSON and respond with JSON that mostly fall under REST API. GraphQL is a cool concept, but I just haven't found myself gravitating towards it. I've built a couple of like simple GraphQL APIs. But the idea with GraphQL is it flips it on its head, because with REST you have many different HTTP endpoints. You have an endpoint for creating something, an endpoint for updating something, an endpoint for listing all of the things. You have multiple endpoints that your clients will need to call. Whereas GraphQL has a single endpoint, but you send it a query that will in return give you back varying data depending on your query. SOAP is similar to a REST API in that you have a lot of different SOAP endpoints. But yeah, I just find myself gravitating more towards REST. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other issue is like once you get past like the hello world of GraphQL, it does get pretty complex. You have, I mean, there are a lot of cool developer features like having the schema and like auto-generated documentation and stuff like that is really cool. But like Doc is saying, you need to then start locking down your routes and securing things. And then you could run into issues where queries that are being sent from your clients may do things that you did not intend. So yeah, I don't know. I just keep using REST. It seems fine. Seems fine. All right, that wasn't a quick answer, was it? Is NFC possible in 2021? Absolutely. NFC is near field communication. Most phones have an NFC reader. And back when NFC like first came out, I was doing like weird little proof of concepts like at my work and even at home. Because you could get like a little NFC sticker. And then I did things like when I would get in my car, my phone would tap the NFC sticker and then it would automatically turn off the Wi-Fi and turn on the GPS. Or I had like an NFC sticker at the right inside my house. And so when I walked in the door, I could tap my phone on it and it would turn the Wi-Fi on, turn the GPS off, do like sort of automation stuff like that. You could also these days like link that into Internet of Things. So like you walk into your house and then you tap it and that triggers like lights to turn on or whatever. But you also could use like motion sensor or something like that. But I don't know. NFC is definitely a thing. And also if you look at some of the cashierless stores, like the stores where you just put products in your basket and then walk out, a lot of the times they're using NFC because each of those products has like an NFC tag on it to automatically scan it. Yeah, so it's a thing. All right. Quick. Yeah, the Sheboss is saying, do I have a GitHub gist or GitLab snippet that I use to start every new project? Or are there steps for a new project just ingrained? Yeah, it depends. I mean, if I'm building an API, I did make that Express API starter thing. So this is a nice little boilerplate Express app that has all the settings that I prefer. So sometimes I use that. I mean, if I'm using some other library, they might have a project generator. Like Vue has the Vue CLI, so I just use that. So yeah, I think at one point I tried to start creating a repo that has things like my ESLint file and like prettier files and stuff like that are reusable, but I never got around to reusing it after I created it. So I mainly just use project generators, I'll say that. All right. I am skipping questions because that's just I'm trying to answer things quickly. When will 1 year sub badges be a thing? I need to take care of that. Like, we need custom bit emotes. We need like a 1 year badge and stuff like that. I need to take care of that. I don't know when though. That's my take on coding with uncommon keyboards. If you're in a workplace, it makes it so that it's really hard for somebody else to come over to your machine and start typing, which can be good and bad. But like a lot of the uncommon keyboards are just good for ergonomics. In terms of like 80, 60, 40, these are like more portable. Like the one I have here is a 60%. This is my preferred keyboard size because it has dedicated arrow keys. I don't have to do like any weird shift thing to use my arrow keys. And I don't like a numpad on my keyboard. To me, it's just wasted space because I use the numbers across the top. So yeah, 60% is my preferred. I'll say that. I'll try to answer this one quickly. Snipers no sniping is asked. I'm currently at a tech school for software dev. We've learned HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Java, C#, SQL, VB.NET, Agile Basics, and a few other things. Where would be a good place to go from there? Is a bachelor's in IT worth it instead of a two year? I would say like if you already have covered a lot of that stuff, you may not need a full degree. You probably could even get a job without going to a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, given what you've already learned. So yeah, I don't know. I think a good place to go from here is just to test your own knowledge, like set out to build some project and see if you can do it. And if you can, then you're probably already ready to find a job rather than going to school for a few more years. Any plans for a video on Nux 3? Somebody asked about Nux 3. I think maybe we will, because if it has the composition API, it sounds fun. Have I ever done HTML transformations or code mods? I haven't, but they're really interesting if you haven't heard of them. Yeah, basically these are a way of automating changes to your code. And where these might be useful is like, let's say you're upgrading from let's say you're upgrading from Vue 2 to Vue 3, and you want to use the composition API everywhere. You technically, it might be pretty hard, but you could create a code mod that would automatically go through your entire code base and change the syntax to be the more recent syntax. And that's actually an easier fix, is if you want to change all of your vars to let, you could write a code mod that modifies your source code to change everything. I personally haven't done it, but some situations are useful. So Babel is typically used after the fact. So like you have your source code and then you run that through Babel, and that's what you ship to end users. A code mod is for developers. It's going to change the source code like you have in your repository to be some other some newer format, or use newer features of a language, that kind of thing. Yeah. Oh, well, this will be our first code example. I don't know if you're still here, Rocker Turner, but they asked, can you please demonstrate the singleton design pattern? This will be fun. We can make some classes and then talk about singletons. Okay. What ESLint style do you recommend? I really like the Airbnb style guide. It's very picky and there are a lot of rules, but I've been using it for a long time and I like it, and I like the rules that they've chosen. Is it possible to toggle an if statement? Like if you're a built an Electron app or Windows app, you could use, you wouldn't be able to toggle it on or off necessarily, but you could use environment variables to decide to do something depending on when and where the app is running. So that's possible. PHP in 2021, what's your opinion? I think a lot of people do it, and I think PHP has gotten a bad rap because it's been around for so long, and so there's potentially a lot of bad PHP code out there just because it's been around for so long. But modern PHP exists, and you can write good code with PHP. So yeah, it's a possibility. I don't do it, but I know it's a possibility. Cats versus dogs. Dogs, mainly because I'm allergic to cats. Have I ever done anything in Golang? I think I did like 1 or 2 code katas in Golang. TechNoob has a question, but they didn't ask it. What else? Solid.js, not familiar with it. How did I learn React? By just looking at the docs and doing it. Yeah, I think by the time I started working in React, I had already been working in Angular 1 for a long time. So the concepts were fairly transferable. There was some new stuff like JSX, but I mainly just did it. Okay, and this is another one that we might try to answer with code. All right, we did a speed run. If you have asked a question, type exclamation mark here and it's going to bubble up. And then we're going to try to do one that involves code of some kind. Maybe this one. Can I show how prototypes can be useful using some examples? Do you mean like the object prototype in JavaScript? Is that what you mean? Or like a prototype app? You do mean that. Okay, so when we're answering one of these other questions, we can talk about that because we're probably going to do some OOP like stuff. If a class takes an object literal argument in its constructor parameters, how to set its default value to a parsed JSON file without it turning undefined. This is a lot of code words. It's like, if you didn't know what this person was talking about, you'd be like, are you speaking English? But I think I understand what you're saying. Object literal, constructor parameters, default value. Yeah, I think I know what you're saying. Let's try to set this up as a code example. And that will get us writing classes, and then eventually we can answer that question about singletons, and we can answer that question about prototypes. So let's do it. We're going to call this OOP stuff, object-oriented programming, which typically means we're just coding with classes. And then we're going to do like a 3-for-1, because somebody earlier was asking about, like, can I model a game in JavaScript? I guess let's try to model Rocket League with object-oriented programming. And really, in this case, we're working on the game logic. Eventually, you could potentially take this game logic and put like a view engine on top of it. I don't know, but let's create a file called game.js. So this is our main entry point, and we'll have a class called game. And specific to this question, we're saying that a class takes an object literal in its constructor. So what that means is we have a constructor, and then that takes in some object. In this case, we'll just call this like game options. Probably need to do something with it, so I'll do for now. I'll just say this.options equals those options. And then I'm going to export this game class so that way we can use it elsewhere. So I'll just do module.exports equals game. Cool. So we have this game. Now we want to use it. So I'm going to call this like run.js. And so this file would be the file that we run that creates an instance of the game and like fires it up. So first we need to bring in that game file like this, and then we can create an instance. So I can say like lowercase game equals a new game. And if you remember, we have a constructor that takes in some options. So let's just say we have what are some options for this game? Throw them in the chat. It could be anything. FPS, I guess. So let's say, yeah, we do width, height, difficulty. Yeah, okay. So let's say FPS 60, number of players, we'll say is 2. Let's do difficulty as well. It's 5, I guess. Yeah, why not? Width and height. So, though, actually, I want to stay away from visual stuff. This is mainly about the logic. Okay, and I'll answer this one from McKinnon, who says, why did I use require over import here? So I'm running in node.js, and node.js does have support for import export. However, to use it, you have to create a package JSON. And then in your package JSON, I believe you have to do something like type. Is it type? Is module, like that. And then now that I've done that, I can use import export, but then it's also going to be picky about the naming of my file. So like, let's see. So right now, if I try to do import game from game.js, I believe you do have to put the extension on here. And then over here, I could do, or try doing export default. Let's see if this works. So now that I'm using exports and imports, and I have it set to type module, maybe it'll work. Require is not defined. Did I not save it? Yeah, okay, so that works, yeah. So that's the only reason I was using, and why I prefer require versus import export, because it's when Node.js introduced ECMAScript module support, there's a lot of things that aren't completely compatible out of the box, which is why I just keep using the old syntax, because things can get weird. And I know that this will work, so I just use it. Cool. Yeah, and that works. Oh, do we have private variables now? I don't know which version of Node I'm running, though. Yeah, and that was the other thing I was thinking about. So if you don't do type module, then you would have to name your files .mjs instead of .js. Yeah, so the main reason I didn't do it by default is because there's a lot of extra stuff you have to do to get it to work inside of Node.js. Yeah. Okay, these are our options. Great, we can create an instance of the game. And then the other thing, so we've covered so far, we have a class called game. Like that. So we have a class called game. Its constructor takes in an object. We'll get there. And then now here's the crux of the question. How do we set a default value to a parsed JSON file without it returning undefined? Okay, so what they are implying here is, let's say, so right now, my game takes in these options and it just uses them. But what if I wanted like these right here to be the default options? So like, what if I want those to be the defaults, but I want to be able to create an instance without having to pass those in because they are the defaults. Let's do it. So let's call this like default options.json. We'll have to format it as JSON. No trailing commas, double quotes. Great. So now the question is, how can I use this file to set as the options if I didn't pass any options in, which is what I'm not doing here. And for example, we'll log game.options. Okay, so right now, since I removed the options and I'm not doing anything special here, options is going to be undefined when we run this. It's undefined. So to fix that, we need some sort of logic that's going to pull in that JSON file as the default. So at least in Node.js, I can require in a JSON file. So let's call this options JSON. And we're just going to require in default options. So that pulls it in, parses it, and now this is essentially an object. Now, the way to use it as a default is you can use the default parameter syntax by doing this. And so what this says is if options is undefined, options should be that JSON file there. And now that I've done this, when I create an instance, I get those default options. So that's at least the initial answer. Yeah, there are other ways to do it though. Like this is technically newer syntax, this default options. What you could also do, yeah, so this is the other thing is, okay, this is going to replace the entire thing if it doesn't exist. But what if when I create the instance, I don't want to pass in all of them, but I do want to change FPS to 60. What is it in here? Let's say by default it's, actually I want to change FPS to 30. All right. If we keep the code the way it is, where it just replaces it, now I'm going to be missing number of players and difficulty, because now by default, it doesn't use those options. It's just using what I passed in. And that's not what we want. So we kind of need a combination of the two. And so what we should do is this. We'll say this.options equals a new object. And then I want you to take all of the properties of our default values and put them into this object. And then after that, take all of the properties of the ones that I passed in here and overwrite those other properties. So now what this will do is it'll combine the two. We'll have all of our defaults, and then those if options has a value, and actually I'll default it to an empty object. Otherwise, I would be this could potentially spread undefined, which would run into an error. So I'll say by default options is empty, put all of the original ones, and then if they did define any options, overwrite those. And so now you'll see what that gives us is all of the defaults with FPS overridden to 30 FPS. So this would probably be my preferred way to do it, because now when people are creating instances, they can do a lot of different things. So we can have like game 1, which has FPS of 30. I hear a beeping noise. I'll be right. Let me write this and I'll be right back. But what you'll see is game 1 is going to have an FPS of 30, but then if we look at game 2, because we didn't pass in any options, we're going to get those default options with 60 FPS. So, excuse me. So we get the one that overrid it, and then we get the one with the additional options. The other aspect of this is I could even pass in extra properties. So I could say like, we have difficulty. Something like trial mode true. And because of the logic that we wrote right here, it's going to combine it with the other one anyway. So now I would get all of the default options plus this extra little trial mode that I passed in. So that's a thing. Did I answer your question, Sakramo, if you're still here? I just ate lunch like 20 minutes ago. That's why I'm burping. So I think we answered it, and we also deciphered this foreign language of object literal, constructor, default values. Yeah, and I'll push this code up to GitHub so you can take a look afterwards. But the main idea here is you could use the default parameter syntax so that if they don't pass anything in, it's just an empty object. And then you can use this spread syntax to combine two objects together. Yeah, okay, so Doc is getting to it. You can make options private and add a read-only get accessor. Let's do it. Honestly, let's do it. So I could just say like, how does it work? Is that going to be it? And then now if I don't get a syntax error, yeah, so this ... is called the spread operator. Nice. Okay. I'll explain what I'm doing in just a second. Yeah, so this is called the spread operator, but if you ever see it used with destructuring or with like array, if you see these triple dots with arrays, that could also be the rest operator, REST, which is slightly different than the spread operator, but they're kind of similar. Okay, so we've changed this to have good object-oriented design. So what has happened is I made options a private variable, and you can see my linter is complaining because it doesn't actually know about this hashtag property here. But by doing this is now a private variable, which means it can't be accessed from the outside world. So you'll see right here when I'm trying to log the options, it just says undefined. So I've encapsulated it in this class so that it can't be accessed from the outside world. What I would need now is an accessor method, a getter. So I could do something like get options, and now this just returns oh yeah. That's actually even better. I'll show it both ways, like this. So what this is saying is if you want to get access to that object, you have to call get options. And so now over here, I could call get options. And this should work. Well, now we see those objects. But what's even better is what if I could still do something like this, but I still couldn't modify it. So let's say we want our code to go back to that. Right now it's returning undefined. Now we can use a getter property. And so the way this works is you say get and then the name of the property. And now this is a function, but it behaves like a property on the object. So because of this keyword right here. So what that allows me to do is from the outside world, I can access it. Something just happened. I can access it, but I can't modify it. So now it works, the getter works, but let's say I tried to do something like game2.options equals lat, and then we log them afterwards. So this code is attempting to modify the options, but because options is just a getter, we're not going to be able to do that. Let's see what happens. Yeah, so even though I wrote the code to overwrite it, it didn't overwrite it. It just stayed as the original value. Yeah, and that's another thing we could get into is, so, okay, great. I now have this accessor, this get, so they can't overwrite it with this, but they technically could modify the properties inside of it. So technically you could do game2options.fps equals 5, and that will modify it because we're modifying the reference to that. And so now that does work. See, we changed the FPS. And if I don't want that, I could return a copy of the object with the spread operator that we just learned about. So return a brand new object every time someone calls this. So they're never getting access to the original object. They're always getting access to a copy. And now it can't be modified. Yeah. The other thing we could do, I'm not even going to get into it, but you could also look into object freeze. Like technically, after they set the options, we could do object.freeze this.options, and then that would prevent modifications altogether. So we don't have to return a copy anymore. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, American 2050, exactly. So let's say you did want a setter, you could use the set keyword. So when someone is saying option game.options equals something, you could write a function that intercepts that getter and does something with it. Oh, actually, that's another way to do it. Yeah, with this, because with the setter, you could just make it a no op. But that would just be the property. I don't think that would be the properties on the thing. Yeah, I think this will work though. So now if we freeze it, those options cannot be changed. So even though I have this code right here that's changing FPS, shouldn't work. Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't work. It's still FPS 60. However, that would also prevent my internal game state from changing options here by freezing it. So we're not going to do that. Okay, great. Let's keep moving. Yeah, I got into it. My brain's exploding. Yeah, so after this video, go look at the code. You could also rewatch this video, try to let it set in. Yeah, it's a great idea. Have a set interval that periodically checks if the options have changed, and then it raises an alarm with an email to the developer if they have. Yeah. Regardless, we answered that question. There was another good one on, let's talk about singletons. Yeah, because we could introduce a singleton into our game here. Can you please demonstrate the singleton design pattern and how it's used, and also some multi-threading? That's a little bit extra. We're at least going to talk about singleton. Well, yeah, there was another one about objects, I think, or OOP. We'll get there, though. Can anyone think of a singleton that would exist inside of a game engine? And I guess first off, I'll just define singleton. Let's define what like the word itself. So singleton just means one of something. A single one. Not two, not three, just one. it's a singleton. And the idea is that only one exists throughout the entire application. Only one instance exists of this thing throughout the application. Yeah, we'll do asset manager. I like that. Because you really only need one asset manager, but you could just pass it around and use it everywhere. So the pattern and the thing itself is just the fact that you only have one instance of a thing throughout the application. Technically, our game here could be considered a singleton, but this is really kind of like the wrapper of everything else. Actually, I'll go with that, Doc. Yeah, like a class controlling the sound output. So we could have something called like a sound manager, and that sound manager, only one of them exists, because we only have one sound card. So I'm gonna go check on that beeping. Oh, you know what it was? My partner's baking bread. I think that's what the beeping is. But I'm still gonna go check. But we're gonna do a sound manager, or like an asset manager. A tile entity of a furnace in a world would be a singleton. Maybe not though, because like you could think of every single tile in the game is an instance of the tile class. So I don't know about that, but maybe. I'm not that familiar with Minecraft. Isn't the ball in Rocket League a singleton? I wouldn't say so, because technically there are multiple games happening, and every game has its own ball. Yeah, and I will say, like, in this case, game kind of is a singleton. And here it's not, because now all of a sudden we have two games going at once for whatever reason. And we also haven't clarified, like, is this game the entire Rocket League, or is this game one match in Rocket League? I'm going to go ahead and say it's the whole world. Oh yeah, logger is another good one for a singleton. A logger, or like log manager, something that logs out to the console. I would say a player is not a singleton, because we have a player class, and then we create multiple instances of that class for each player that's playing. And so the moment you're creating more than one instance, it is not a singleton. And the thing that I'll show in a second is that there's actually like a pattern of how you have one place where you always call to get that singleton instance, and that will have some logic to say, like, oh, if it doesn't exist, create it, but if it does exist, use the existing one. Yeah, you could think of it like that. A singleton is static. It's like not changing once it's set. I mean, technically the internal properties could change, but the instance itself doesn't change. Yeah. What about a database connection? I mean, you could have like a database manager, and that's a singleton instance, because everywhere throughout your application that needs to use the database would use the database manager. However, a lot of applications might use a connection and then release a connection. So the connection itself wouldn't be a singleton, but the thing managing all of the connections could be a singleton. Yeah, so the thing managing the pool of connections would be the singleton. Okay, I'll be right back momentarily. Hello, I'm back. The house isn't on fire, so I'm going to assume that it was the bread maker. Yeah, if you do !YT, Somebody did it. there's my YouTube channel. Okay, so we're talking about singletons. I'm actually going to do asset manager because actually we'll do sound manager because the sound manager could also manage the library of sounds that are used, like sound effects. Is the drop game broken? It's not an easy fix, honestly, because I think what happened is when my internet went out earlier, yeah, it crashed the server. Maybe we can fix it though. Yeah, we fixed it. Though I might have multiple processes on my machine conflicting, but it's okay. All right, let's make a singleton. So the idea is, first of all, a singleton typically starts out as a class, just like anything else. So if we have the sound manager class, this will have a constructor. Or does it even need one? And then we'll export it. The Sheepa says, if you're wondering why I'm more active than normal, if I stay active in the chat here, it looks like I'm active at work. Yeah, that's the life hack. It's just type in Twitch chat. Everyone will think you're working. Okay, so just like any other class, we're going to define it, we're going to export it, but we do have somewhere in our app that is managing and making sure that we only have one single instance of this thing. There are multiple ways to do it. Like we could do something like this. Like so, because the game is the catch-all of everything, it's the overarching thing. We could have a getter for sound manager, and then we could do a similar thing. So let's say we have a private property called sound manager, lowercase, that is initially null, and then we can have some logic in here. So the first time someone tries to get the sound manager, we'll say, so does this dot sound manager, if it equals null, then we're going to set it to be a new instance of sound manager, and we'll need to require it in. And then we just return this dot sound manager. So here I'll need to import the sound manager. And at this point, it could be considered a singleton because if we make sure that the only place we get access to it is from the game instance. So if we do game.soundmanager, that's going to give us one instance. And the first time we call it, it created that instance, and then every time after that, it's just returning that same instance. We're never creating multiple instances. And so later on in my app or in my code, I might do something like, or we can just do it from the run. An evil way of doing it, return it from the constructor. I guess technically we could, because we could define almost like a private variable here at the module level. Let's explore that in a second. But what we'll do right now is I'll show you now that I've added that singleton property, I can do game1.soundmanager. And if we log it, we should see that it's an instance of a sound manager. Yeah, it is an instance of a sound manager. But now, no matter what I do, I am always getting access to that same one. Yeah, it's actually true, Doc. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. Is you have a private property at like the top level or some utility class or the manager of everything else in your application, and it has a getter that only ever returns the same instance and creates it the first time that it's accessed. That's one way to do it. And this is probably the main way of doing it. What Doc is mentioning is the fact that in JavaScript, whatever you return from the constructor actually will end up as your instance. So what you could do is you could create a variable out here, call it the instance, create an instance of Sound Manager, and then in the constructor, just return that one instance. Yeah, don't do this, but this will technically work. And now you technically could do new Sound Manager anywhere in your app. But doing that would actually just return the same instance all the time. Anytime you created a new instance, you would get the same instance. It's actually really confusing. Don't do this. But it would work. It technically would work. But this might take in some options as well. It could have some default options. I don't know. Something like this. Yeah. Why not a static field that holds the instance in the class itself? That way you can access it from everywhere. Yeah, that's probably another common way of doing it. How do I do static properties in JavaScript? Is it just, can I use the static keyword? Can I do this? I guess I'll also mention the other thing I could have done is instead of setting it to null, I could have just set it there, and then this always returns that one anyways, but regardless. Will this syntax work? Let's see. No, it returns undefined. Oh, no. Yeah, that's why it's undefined, is because I have to access it from game. So with a static property, you don't access it from the instance. You access it from the class itself. Will that work? Yeah, that works. Cool. And then now that we've done that, anywhere in my app where I want that one singleton instance of the Sound Manager, I would just do game.soundmanager. And I don't even need an instance at that point. So this is probably the preferred way of doing it. But I'll leave that other one because it is another option where, yeah, the thing that makes it a singleton is that there's only one in the entire app. How you do that is up to you, whether it's a property on your main class or a static property that never gets reset. Yeah. If there's a case where you don't need a sound manager, the original way means there's no sound manager taking up space. Yeah, that's a good point Acid Spark is making, is in this scenario, this will always have an instance of Sound Manager. Whereas in this scenario, it will only create it if we access it, which means if we, for whatever reason, if we never access that property, we'll never have an instance of it, so it won't be taking up memory. Yeah. Can there be a scenario when this file is re-downloaded and we lose the instance? When the game is running, no. So it really depends on where this code is running, but the idea here is once this starts up, there's no like going back. If you restart it, that's a whole new instance of the game, which will have a singleton instance of the Sound Manager. Now, I will note that it's a single instance throughout, and I guess in this scenario where I have multiple instances of the game, this static property truly is a singleton, because now even if I had two instances of game, they would still have the same access or the same Sound Manager and access to it. Whereas if I did it this way, each game would have its own instance of Sound Manager. So, yeah. Why not sound manager.instance? Yeah, I mean, that's another way of doing it is if you have a static property on the sound manager itself called instance, that is an instance of itself. Does it want these up here? Why is this complaining? Wait, instance is a keyword? A static class with all static members is a type of singleton. Yeah, that's another way to think about it, or that is another version of a singleton. I'll say in the JavaScript world, at least what I'm used to, we are, as JavaScript developers, we are not used to static properties. In like Java and C#, we use static properties a lot. This is new for a lot of JavaScript developers. But technically, yeah, you could have a static class with all the properties that are static, and that technically is a singleton because you're not creating instances of it. What if the Node.js module returns the instance? Oh, that could work as well. Actually, that's another thing I didn't consider is if I did something like this. Yeah, you're totally right. We're gonna get rid of this. So now, by doing it this way, where whenever I import this sound manager, I'm always getting the same copy. This probably is how we would do it in the Node.js world. And let's talk about this. So now that I've done that, now I don't even need this. And then over here, I don't even need this. I could just import it in. Like this. And so now that I've done this, the way the module system works is these things are cached. So the first time it's exported, it creates an instance, but then every time after that, it's going to return that same instance. Yeah, so this is absolutely one way of doing a singleton, like especially in Node. Now, no matter where I require or import this in, I'm always getting the same instance. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I would say this is probably how I would do it in the JavaScript world. Because like, even though we're like doing OOP stuff right now, I hardly ever use like static or even like private properties in JavaScript. So yeah. Are we sure about that? Wait, are you saying, are we sure that we're always going to get the same instance? Yeah. 100%. Definitely. All right, let's answer some more code questions. That's true. Yeah, Doc is saying if someone knows what they're doing, they technically could remove it from the node cache, which would actually create a new instance the next time it's called. Yeah. Okay, so thank you for your question about singletons, Rocker Turner. Did we have another question related to objects or OOP? Does anybody remember? Wasn't there like a similar question? Do the latest private properties for JavaScript with hashtag in front of them? Yeah. If you look for ECMAScript, oh, somebody asked about the prototype. Okay, we'll talk about that next. Private property proposal. Proposal private fields. Yeah, so I think this proposal, it got merged here, but I think it's stage 3. Yeah, this is basically accepted syntax now. Like there's like no going back. And here it is where they talk about it. I mean, stage 3 is right before it's stage 4, and stage 4 means it's officially in ECMAScript in the language definition. And so we're really close here. Okay, let's talk about prototypes now. So FCon asked, how could you show how prototypes can be useful using some examples? So the way I'm going to describe this is basically all of the code we've written right now. We don't see .prototype anywhere, right? We just have like this class keyword. That's fine. We're actually not using inheritance anywhere, so we really wouldn't even be benefiting from the prototype anyways. But what I'll say is this class keyword is actually just syntactic sugar for the object prototype and for constructor functions, which I'll show in a second. But we've gotten some support events, and I thank you. Nikolov with the 2 months, Refactor with the 18 months. Haven't been able to catch streams lately, just dropping by to say, wow. Thank you, Refactor. Natsuko with the 3 months. Ramelfont with the sub, thank you very much. TD Racing with the 6 months. Half a year, say what? Can you do a stream on building a headless site with a CMS? Eventually. I think it's a good topic. And Blank, thank you for the 9 months, and Unfair with the 15 months. Thanks for all the support, everyone. Let's talk about prototypes. So the way I'm going to show this is let's rewrite this using constructor function syntax instead of the class keyword. So a long time ago, I guess that six years ago at this point, we didn't have the class keyword. And then in ECMAScript 2015, the class keyword was introduced. So anytime before that, we didn't have the class keyword. And we could still write code like this, but we had to do other stuff. And the way we did it was with a constructor function. So you have a function like this, and this is essentially the constructor that we have right here. So we could have options. We also didn't have default syntax back then, so so we didn't have this yet. You couldn't do that, but what you could do is say if options does not exist, then options equals an object like that. That's almost the same thing as default syntax. And then yeah, at this point, we wanted a getter. I don't think you could do that with the prototype, but what I'll show you is, like, let's say we wanted a method like get options. That's what we would put on the prototype. So we could say game.prototype.getOptions. And that's going to be a function that returns like this dot options. Yeah, there was no spread operator. We also, like, we could do some interesting thing with closures if we really wanted to make sure that options couldn't be accessed. But we also could do something like this dot options equals object dot assign options and, well, options JSON and options. So object.assign is what we use before the spread operator. Yeah. And then, like, this is not by putting the underscore there, it doesn't make it a private variable, but that's kind of like, if you see a variable with an underscore, it probably means it's private. And yeah, but regardless, this is how we would have written it before we had the class keyword. And so that, all of that to say, whenever you are putting a method on a class, so like earlier I had this get options method here. So this is a method on the class. When you do that, this is what's happening behind the scenes. It's putting a function on the game prototype. And the thing about the prototype, and I guess what also the question that you asked is like, why is it useful? This isn't useful necessarily to the developer, but this is useful in that every instance of a game shares the same copy of this function. And that's the benefit we get here from using the prototype. So, for example, over here, if I were to do game.getOptions or game.getOptions, or like game1.getOptions or game2.getOptions, even though they're two separate instances, the actual function behind the scenes, there's only one of them. There's just one behind the scenes. And then when that function is called for game 1, this is equal to game 1. And when that function is called for game 2, this is equal to game 2. And so there's some memory benefits there because all of the instances of game share this same copy of the function. But this syntax is doing exactly this behind the scenes. Yeah, we technically you could do that. The other thing to know about the prototype is that it's kind of like inheritance. So if we were to create a let's say we create a Rocket League class that inherits from game, technically its prototype would be or its prototype chain would go up. So its parent prototype would be game. So Rocket League's parent prototype is game. Game's parent prototype is just capital O object, like the root thing. And so yeah, each inherited thing has the prototype of the previous thing. So it shares all of the functionality and shares all the functions of the previous thing, unless they're overwritten or overridden. Yeah, and that's the other interesting thing is with the prototype, you actually could add functions to existing objects. There's no rules against that. I'm just going to comment this out though, so our other code keeps working. But let's do that over here. We'll call this like string extensions. Basically, you shouldn't do this, mainly because you're modifying one of the built-in object prototypes, and that could cause code that you're using or libraries that you're using to go wrong or do things that they did not intend to. But we could say string.prototype.answer and set that to a function that returns 42. Now, what does this mean? This means I could have a string like wow, and it now has a function on it called answer. And I can use this anywhere. So after I've run this code once, this thing right here, now every single string in my code base has a function called answer on it. This isn't that useful, but you could do something like make this uppercase, please, and thank you. If you prefer to be really proper when you're coding instead of just doing to uppercase. But now, anywhere in my code base, I can do string dot make this uppercase, please, and thank you, and I'll get an uppercase version of it. Wow, in all caps. Wow. Is this called monkey patching? I think that's one term for it, yeah. But like I was saying, you typically don't do this in modern code bases because what we're doing here is what's called polluting the prototype. Yeah, that's the other thing is you can overwrite existing ones. And so we're polluting it in that if some other library depended on this function existing in one capacity, like this make this uppercase please and thank you function, but they thought it was going to do something else, but now you've just overridden it to do this, there could be some conflicts. But the other interesting thing is you can overwrite existing ones. So I could actually change to uppercase to be a function that just returns no, like Doc said. And now this calls that, which will give us back no. But also if we just tried to do wow dot to uppercase, it'll just say no. Yeah. So this is useful in some cases. But don't do it. Like the better way to do this is to just have a function that takes in a string and then operates on that string. And that way you're not overwriting the prototype. And now if we want to use it, we could do it like this. So we'll say, make this uppercase, please, and thank you. We'll pass in wow. I can still say wow.toUppercase. But where's the fun in that? Oh. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, this is not as fun, but this is a better coding practice because we're not overwriting built-ins, and people can opt in to using our functions rather than just forcing them to by overwriting the existing functions. And this is how a library like Lodash works. Like if you look at Lodash, there are a ton of utility functions, but Lodash is not modifying our array prototype or our object prototype. You explicitly import the functions you want to use, and then you pass in the objects or the prototypes, or objects or arrays into those functions to be operated on. They don't override the existing methods. Yeah. And so like Lodash does not modify the prototype. Lodash gives us a bunch of functions that we can then pass our stuff into. Yeah. Yeah. I guess, was it MooTools, or what was the library that overrode the array prototype? And then there was a conflict with Flatten. Was it Moo? Yeah. So I'm pretty sure. Was it MooTools? Pollute the prototype is something you would do before you leave the company. Yeah, but ideally that code wouldn't get past code review. I'm pretty sure they have some array methods in here. Yes. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Look at this. They pollute the prototype. So MooTools is a library that's been around for a very long time. And the library itself, like if you were to import this library into your JavaScript code base, it modifies the array prototype. And so now, anywhere in your code base, if you call flatten, you're actually calling the method that MooTools implemented. And the reason this was somewhat relevant like a year or two ago is because we were trying to introduce flatten into the actual specification so that it would exist everywhere and you wouldn't have to import a library for it. But I believe there were some people that work on MooTools that were actually on the ECMAScript committee, and they're like, no, you can't call it flatten because that's going to mess with our library. But their library shouldn't have been overriding the prototype to begin with. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Does anyone actually use Lodash, by the way? I don't, and I'm afraid I'm missing out on something. I would say, I don't use Lodash, and mainly because I'm more familiar with the features that are available to me in JavaScript. And so I just use those, like things like array reduce in JavaScript can do a lot of the things with a little bit of extra code, a little bit of work that Lodash would do with just one function. Because Lodash has like group by, and there's a few other ones. I think technically you could even write your own flatten with a reduce. But Lodash has a lot of built-in functions that just do the thing. Whereas if you're writing it yourself, you'd have to write a little bit of extra code to get it working. But in modern JavaScript, there's a lot of stuff that just exists already, so you don't need a library like that. But what I'll say is there are a lot of developers that grew up in a JavaScript world that didn't have all of that, so they got really used to leaning on a library like underscore or Lodash to do those things, and so that's just how they're used to coding. I'll say that I actually don't like to see it, because if I'm looking in the code base, I myself am not familiar with all of the utility methods available in Lodash. So when I'm reading someone else's code, anytime I come across a Lodash method, I'm going to have to go to the Lodash docs and look up what does that thing actually do to be able to understand the code. Whereas if I were just looking at a reduce or a map, I could intuit what that code is doing versus having to go look at some other documentation. So that's my preference and like why I don't use it. But I will say there are still a lot of people out there that use it. But it's just, another thing that you'd have to be familiar with, because if you see these methods all over your code base, if you're not familiar with Lodash, you're going to have to look them up very often to see what they actually do. I mean, and some of them are self-explanatory, but I don't know. That's how I see it. Yeah, so Lodash has debounce, but I mean, you've seen me implement debounce on stream before. It's not that hard, but they do have a debounce one. Yeah, and then order by is like a custom sort method, which is cool. I wasn't comfortable how my previous dev lead depended a lot on Lodash, yeah. And I think it's just one of those things, like, yeah, if your code base is going to be that way, you just have to expect all of your developers to know all these methods that you're using. Otherwise, the code can be really hard to read. What's the difference between array.method equals and array.prototype.method equal? Ah, that's a good question. So if you do array.method, this is like setting a static property on the array class. If you do array.prototype.method, this is creating a method for any instance of that class. So array.method would be something like array.isArray. It's a static function that doesn't require an instance and you can use it anywhere. But array.prototype.map is an instance function because you map on an instance of an array, or array.prototype.find is a instance method. Yeah. It's nice and modular so you can piecemeal the more tedious functions instead of constantly reinventing the wheel. It's true. Like sometimes we do have to write a little bit too much code with like reduce or map, but I think I would still prefer that to just seeing a bunch of functions thrown around. I mean, I think if you come from another programming language that has a lot of utilities like this built in, you might like it a lot. Like, I'm thinking, for example, Python or Ruby. A lot of this stuff is just, these types of functions are just built into the language, whereas in JavaScript, they're not. I don't know. It's really just a preference. Intuitively add objects together. We're doing another override of the prototype to just return the wrong thing. Yeah. It's like jQuery, you either love it or hate it, yeah. And I think, like I was mentioning, this is a remnants of before JavaScript included a lot of this stuff. So a lot of developers never really learned the newer stuff that got added to JavaScript and just kept depending on Lodash, just like a lot of developers never decided to learn React or Vue and just keep depending on jQuery. It's fine, like, but it's a preference. Yeah. What do you think about Dino? It's cool. I haven't looked at it in like a year, but it's cool. I like the overall concept of it. Would an array declared before we add any method to the array prototype have the previously declared array have that latest method? Yeah, so the fun part about this is when you put something on the prototype, that now exists for all the old instances and all the new instances. Because it's on the prototype, any existing instance can now still access it. Yeah, it exists for everything, old and new. Yeah, possibly. I don't... We'd have to get more specific. I mean, I have been wanting to do a tutorial or a video on like code style and structure and stuff like that, but I don't know. Yeah. Can Lodash increase the size of the app? Yeah, so I mean, every Lodash function you bring into your app is adding a little bit more code. But the nice thing about Lodash is you only import the methods that you need. So typically, you're only having to ship and bundle the methods that you use, not the entire library, which is nice. Unless you do import star from Lodash as _. Then you're importing all 12 kilobytes. Alka with the 18 months. Thank you, friend. Thanks for being here. We have some other supports too. What was the last one I read? I think Unfair, thanks for the 15 months. Blank with the 9 months. Vinox with the 2 months. The Shivas with the gift, thank you. Mr. Demon Wolf with the host, how you doing, friend? And Rico with 100 bits, thank you very much. And Alka, thank you for the resub. Okay, That was fun. Let's answer a couple more questions and then I'm going to go. But hopefully this was useful for you. Maybe you learned some new tricks. We got some default parameters. We've got the spread operator. We've got private properties. That's pretty crazy. We've also got getters and setters. We've learned about the singleton pattern. We learned a little bit about the prototype. I need to organize my my thoughts on how to talk about the prototype because that was a little all over the place, but maybe you learned a little bit of something. And also, like, we talked about like overriding existing methods. Yeah. And then, yeah, I'm not going to talk about that right now, Thanveer, but that's like the next logical place to take this is, okay, now that we're talking about like these prototype functions, where does this come into play? But it's actually, it makes it really useful. I mean, it is useful because we talked about earlier how multiple instances can share the same copy of the function. And the reason that's the case is because this can be set to something different anytime the function is run. So let's say, for instance, we're calling get options on game 1. This will be set to game 1. If we call game2.get options, this will be set to game 2. So that's where the this keyword comes into play with prototype is when that function is called, inside that function, this is equal to the instance that it was called on. But you can also change it with call, apply, and bind. You might have seen before somebody do something like this, like array.prototype.reduce. So reduce is a function that's built into the array prototype. But let's say I want to reuse that function on some iterable thing. We could use call. So I can pass in the this, what the this value should be inside of that function. And in this case, I'll pass it in as a string instead of an array. But this will still work because a string is iterable just like an array is. Yeah, and then we get our reduce function that has like the accumulator and the current value. I don't know, what could we accumulate this to? Something like this. And so what this would do is this would call reduce on this function. It would call reduce on this string instead of an array. And we're just going to put the number 2 in between all the other letters. Yeah, W20, It's not useful, but the reason I mention that is because the way to think about this is since reduce exists on the prototype, the code that is defined and written for the actual reduce function uses the this keyword inside. So anytime it's referring to the array, it uses this. But what call allows us to do is to change that this keyword. So we've changed, like when that function gets called, we're changing the this inside of that function to be this string. And now that it's this string, we can do like interesting reduce stuff with it. I don't know. All right, let's answer another question. Frightened Panda has a TypeScripty question. Trying not to get too in the weeds, but is there a reason to use export default class over export class? I alternate between the two, and I haven't decided which style I like more, or if there's a good reason to use one over the other. Yeah, let's talk about it. And I can show it with like these examples. We'll start with a new example, though, because there's a bunch of stuff in there. Export default examples. And actually, I will use import export syntax with node for this one. So in my package JSON, I'm going to set type to module. And now I can use import export. So let's say I have an index.js. And let's say I want to import. Let's model something else. So before we were modeling a game, what is some real world thing we can model with objects? I only need like 1 or 2 examples because it's really just to show imports and exports. Oh, Usama's quick. Well, I'll answer this one real quick. What's the difference between this and self? So this is a keyword. Self is not a keyword, but in the past, it was a very common practice to create a variable called self and set it equal to the instance of to the this value, because you typically were using this inside of some nested function, and that nested function might have had a different this value. So you were using self, which was defined out there. Yeah, students, cars. Let's make Twitch chat. Okay, so we'll start here. So let's say like this doesn't exist yet. We'll need to create it. But let's say we're importing it in, and then now we want to use it. For now, I'm just going to log what the thing is, and then let's create it. So I'll create a file here called twitchchat.js, and because I'm importing it in, this needs to export something. So I could do export default class Twitch chat. This has a constructor. It has a chatters array. Fine. But that line right there, the export default, what this says is when someone imports this file in, they are going to get this here, no matter what. And I believe I could even call it whatever I want on the other side. Let's try it. So yeah. Who's typing F? What's happening? And Kinda Cherries is saying is import only supported in Node with the experimental. No, I think I'm using Node version 14 or 15. I think it was introduced in like version 12 without the feature flag, something like that. But yeah, you don't need the feature flag. What you do need is to have a package JSON with type of module, or you name these files .mjs instead of .js. Okay, but let's examine what happened here. This file exports Twitch chat, and we're saying this is the default export, meaning when somebody imports this in, they're going to get this class. But what that means is we can import it as whatever we want. It would make sense to call it Twitch chat, but basically what I'm getting back from this import is the default set value from that file. And of course, if we call it Twitch chat, it's going to work as well, but we do get an instance of Twitch chat. Great. Now, how does that differ from export? Now, first of all, my linter will complain because it's like, hey, you don't have a default export. But typically, this is useful if you're exporting like multiple things from a file. But now that I don't have the word default on there, this is actually a named export. And what that means is if I want to use it over here, I explicitly need to pull out that name from the import. So I need to do this. Now, this looks like destructuring. This is not destructuring. This is a named import. And I'll talk about why that's different in a second. But what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, curly braces means that that's everything that is exported from that file. And specifically, the one that I want to bring in is Twitch chat. And this does have to have the same name as this. So because I've exported it as Twitch chat, this is a named export, and when I want to import it, I have to use the same name. Now, this should work in a similar way. Yeah, it's just fine. But I'll say the reason you would do this is if we're exporting multiple things from here. So if I export something like a function get uptime, now this thing exports two different things. So if I wanted to get this function, I could specify that here, and I could call it, but now I have two named imports coming from that one file. So that works just fine. And so this is useful if you're exporting multiple things and then you want to import them in by name. The other interesting thing you could do is group them all together. So I could say import star as all the things, and then now this is essentially like an object that has multiple properties of all the things that were exported. So if I do this, it should work the same way. It does. That works the same way. But now that I have these two exports, if I were to do this, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get an error. I'm pretty sure the error I'm going to get is like no default export. Let's see. Yeah. The requested module does not provide an export name default. And so this is where this gets into the specifics of ECMAScript modules and how like this isn't like the node.js module system. This is ECMAScript modules. It's very specific because if I don't have a default export, I must use this named import syntax to pull it in. Or I must use this syntax star to pull all of them in. Yeah, so CommonJS is the require in module.exports. Yeah, so the question really was, why would you do one over the other? And I think it comes down to this. If you know that you're only ever going to be exporting one thing from that file, use default export. That way, everywhere that you want to use it, it's just a simple import. You don't have to do any silly like import star. If you need to export multiple things, then don't have a default export. Just have individual exports. And then you can just bring them in as needed, like this. So we'd bring in Twitch chat, and we'd bring in get uptime. And that'll work just fine. The thing I'm not showing is you actually could combine the two. So I could do export. Yeah, so Andreas is asking, can you combine them? You can. So let's say I have a default export and then I have a named export. The way this would work is you actually could just do this. Now that I have a default export, I can import Twitch chat just fine because that is the default export. I get it. So I get the class. Beautiful. But now if I want that named export, get uptime, you combine the syntax. So you say Twitch chat, and then you do this destructuring looking thing to say I want to pull in that named export, get uptime to use it there. And if you've ever worked in React, you do this all the time, right? You say import React, comma, and then you have the curly braces with like use state or use effect. Essentially, you're importing the default export and the named exports. And so their file would look like this. Like they would have the default React class and then also some named exports from that same file. Yeah. Behind the scenes is destructuring. It's not, and I actually want to explore that really quick because I'll show you what happens if you treat this like destructuring. And thank you, Nikinsey. Oh yeah, that's the other thing you could do. So you could just do this named import thing, but you could say default as Twitch chat. Why is that complaining? Use default imports. Oh yeah, it just doesn't like that. But that's basically saying, all right, whatever the default export is, put it in this variable, but then I want to pull this specific named export. Yeah. Okay, I think I'm gonna create some separate files just to demonstrate this. I'm gonna call this like options.js, and let's see what happens here. So let's say I actually just export an object from this file. I'm doing a default export, and then this has something like, I don't know, size 42, color green. It just has some options on it, right? Now let's say I want to pull these options into another file. I'm going to change this back to this syntax. Okay, so I could say import options from options.js. And now we can use it. This should work just fine. We should get a nice little object with size and color. Great. But let's say I wanted to do some destructuring. Like let's say I wanted to pull off this size value here. This is an object. The whole thing is the default export. Watch what happens if I try to destructure this, right, and pull off size. Does anyone want to guess? I'm going to get an error. Does anyone want to guess what the error is? Because, and that's all of this to talk about, like when you're using this syntax, it's specifically the ECMAScript module syntax. And when ECMAScript sees, well, like when error, no address. When the engine sees this, what does it think you're doing right here, right? I'm pretty sure if we don't get an error, then all of this is for nothing, but we're gonna get an error. Does anybody know? Any guess? Yeah, so what Andreas is saying, I think, is along the lines, but we're going to get an error that says there is no named export called size in this file, right? So like what we're writing right here is expecting that we actually have something called size that we can import, right? So watch what happens. I'm going to run this. It'll say size. Yeah, I don't know. The requested module does not provide an export named size. Null pointer exception. So basically, when you're using the latest ECMAScript module syntax, you can't really combine the two. You can't combine destructuring with named imports. Now, I'll say this. You can do that in a Webpack app because Webpack doesn't follow the import-export specification exactly. So you technically could do something like this in a Webpack app, I believe. But if you're using the actual ECMAScript module specification, which is what Node.js is using, you can't do this. And so the way you'd have to do it is you'd have to import options, because that's the default export, and then we can destructure it after it's imported. So I can destructure it like this, and this should work. We get the size there. But yeah, if you were to do this in an app that uses Webpack, it would work, but that's because Webpack is doing it wrong. It's not following the module specification to the T, which is fine, because I mean that actually it seems easier, right? But really, if you look at this from like a language implementation standpoint, they have to draw the line somewhere. And basically they said, okay, if you're using this syntax, we're going to assume that you mean named import. We're not going to try the name import, and if that doesn't work, we'll do a destructuring. So, does anybody care about my rant that I just went through? Oh, you're right. We could do that, Doc. You're right. So we could combine the syntax. So we combine, we want the default as options, and then we could destructure that. Or do we just do it like that? Let's see. Well, thank you, Farshid. I appreciate it. How would you do this? So import default as options. So this should at least give us the options. It does. Great. And then can we destructure it from here? Yeah, I don't think it's going to like that. Let's see. No, it doesn't like that. I would think you could destructure it at this point. No, I think that's all of us just confusing what Webpack allows us to do versus what is actually allowed in the specification. But what Doc is saying is default size. Oh wait, import. But then we can't have top level 08, can we? Oh, it works. Yeah, this is really weird though. But at the end of the day, we've now gone from named imports or default imports to whatever the resolved value of the import is an object of some kind, and now then we're just destructuring that object, and that object has a default property on it. That's what this does. Yeah. Yeah, and this is what's known as a dynamic import. Yeah, what Alka is saying. Await is supported at the top level. Is it in modules? Maybe it was added in version 15, but I am using Node version 15. Maybe it's only in the imports. Yeah, I don't know. ES modules support top level await. I guess that's what it is because I'm in a module. Somebody had another suggestion. Let's try it really quick. Yeah, Yazuf is saying, can we do import sizes? I don't think that's going to work because what this is saying is yeah, this doesn't jive with my brain. But this wouldn't be right because you have to use the default keyword here to tell it that we're going to name default options, and then you would need to destructure that. But I mean, I'll show you. We'll just get a syntax error that like this is probably an unexpected curly brace. Got to save it. Yeah, it doesn't like that curly brace. Okay. Frightened Panda, are you still here? Because you're the one that asked the original question. But their main question was about, is there a reason to use export default instead of just export? And I think I gave you the reasons. Basically, if you're only exporting one thing, export default is fine. If you're exporting multiple things, then don't do export default. You could combine the two. And then also we just started talking about the implications of ECMAScript modules. So cool. Hopefully that was helpful. Let's see if there's some other ones. I'll answer 2 more and then I gotta go. Have I ever tried building something with AI like GPT-3? I haven't. I've used like, what's the P5 library that we use all the time? Oh, I didn't even see the latest messages. And what's up, Milky Dev? Thanks for being here. Everyone check out Milky Dev. What if we used star as... Maybe? Let's try it. Because we actually didn't try that, did we? Let's see, does this work? Import star as options. That should work. Yeah. And then I don't think this works because it's like, this is basically like we're trying to destructure this in the middle of an assignment. But that is how I would want to do it. Because now if I want size, I would put that on the left-hand side of a destructuring. Because options is an object that has default inside of it, and default is an object that has a size property inside of it. Like this. Yeah, and that would work. Okay. Yeah, if you do import star, you get everything. But you don't need to do that if there's only one default export, because if you do that, then you have to do .default, which not very nice. Yeah, glad to hear it, Frightened Panda. ML5, that's the one. Oh yeah, look at this. Milky Dev has the staff badge. That's so cool. I heard you got hired at Twitch. Look at you. That's so fancy. Great work. But yeah, the question was, have I used AI stuff? Not really. I have used ML5, which just works in the web browser, but I haven't done any like custom AI stuff. I guess technically I did do that one stream where I was trying to train an AI on a bunch of tweets. But yeah, I haven't done anything in depth. Yeah. American 2050. That's a great way to end this stream, though. Isn't it easier to just do console.log42? Then we don't have to import anything. You're not wrong. All right, I'm going to answer one more question, and then I'm going to go. Oh, we actually just kind of talked about the prototypes. I'm going to go ahead and call that one answered. You can ask it again next time if I didn't answer. Chad says, my last question is a 10-part question. Yeah, and Bimsicle, thanks for being. I don't know if I saw your messages earlier, but yeah, glad to have you here. Hopefully you're doing well. I'll answer this one. Fanvir asks, what are your thoughts on Salesforce engineering? There's some front end they use called Salesforce Lightning. So in a recent project at work, we were doing a Salesforce integration, but the code I was writing was just calling the Salesforce API. But I'll say in general, knowing things about Salesforce is probably good for your own marketability as a dev. And if you're really looking for work and can't find it, you could probably learn about Salesforce and then find a job because there's a ton out there. But Salesforce is like is it an ERP, enterprise resource planner? Basically, people use it to manage their companies, and really large companies use it to manage their companies as well. So my thoughts on Salesforce are, I personally don't like doing Salesforce development, but if you're looking for something, you can probably almost always find a job that has to deal with Salesforce. And then Salesforce Lightning, I think, is their specific UI library that helps with integrating with their Salesforce API stuff. I'm not totally familiar, though. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I like that idea, the She-Boss. I don't know if you're still here, but you mentioned an app to show the stream who are the most active new users. We need something like that in general, because there's no. I guess the only loyalty rewards we see are seedlings and stuff like that. But it would be interesting to see stats of who's sent the most messages and who's done the most drops, and and then people could specifically reward those viewers that are new but haven't subbed or something like that. Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be an encouragement to spam. People already do that anyways, and we have slow mode. I don't know. Yeah, and I need to just work on that. Okay, there were some questions we didn't answer, but I gotta go. I appreciate you all. Thanks for hanging out on this wonderful Friday. Hopefully, you learned something. Hopefully you feel different now than when the stream started. Whether or not you feel better or you feel worse, hopefully this stream changed you in some way. Hopefully. But I appreciate you all. Let's go on a raid. I feel 3 hours older. Nice. Going on a raid. If you're a sub, you can use this raid message. Chain. If you're not a sub, you can use this raid message. I'm glad to hear it, Ericsson. And I don't know where we're going to go, but wherever we go, show them lots of love. Say hello, drop a follow, all that good stuff. Next stream is planned for Friday, though might be some early week streams. I don't know, I'm not making any promises, but you might see more of me this upcoming week. All right. Stay awesome wherever you are in the world. Have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or night. I'm just waiting for the chat to catch up. There it is. Have a wonderful afternoon, morning, evening, or night. And until next time, here's this.